Tonight, we're diving into every magical creature in the wizarding world. From the deadliest beasts that haunt the darkest wizards, there have been creatures who share their secret world. And for just as long, the wise among them have tried to understand these companions, to name them, to sort them, and to keep them safe from the frightened eyes of those who could not see the wonder in a scale, a feather, or a slow blink in the shadows. Tonight, as you settle and let your breathing grow slow and even, we drift together into that quiet, half-lit realm and open the pages of what the wizarding world has come to call the great bestiary of the wizarding world. It is a curious thing, this instinct to catalog. Long before there were tidy laws and stamped parchments, wizards told one another which creatures could be approached and which were best admired from a great distance. Grandmothers passed warnings to grandchildren by firelight, and hedge witches scratched drawings of wings and claws into the margins of their spellbooks. Over the centuries, these scattered whispers gathered into something larger, something almost tender in its patience, until at last the magical governments of the world set themselves the enormous task of ordering the whole living tapestry. In Britain, that duty fell to the Ministry of Magic, and within its marble corridors, a small and devoted office took on the gentle burden of deciding where every magical thing belonged. The first great question they faced was deceptively simple. What, after all, is a beast, and what is a being? It sounds like the sort of riddle you might turn over drowsily on the edge of sleep, and indeed the wizards who wrestled with it found it far harder than they expected. A being, they eventually agreed, is any creature with intelligence enough to understand the laws that govern their society and to bear some share in shaping them. A beast, by contrast, is a magical creature who lives by instinct and nature rather than by law, however clever or beautiful they may be. The line between the two has wandered back and forth across the ages, for the wizarding world has not always been wise or fair about who deserved a voice. Centaurs, those proud and star-reading dwellers of the deep woods, were offered the dignity of being classed as beings, and quietly chose the older word for themselves instead, preferring the freedom of the trees to the noise of committees. Merpeople, who sing beneath the cold lakes in a language that sounds, above water, like harsh cries, asked as well to keep their own quiet distance. And so the great catalog learned an early and humbling lesson that to name a creature is not the same as to own them. Beyond beings and beasts, there hovers a third and stranger category, softer than smoke. These are the spirits, the ghosts and the wisps and the echoes of what once lived. The ministry, in its careful way, set them apart. For a ghost is neither a breathing being nor a hunting beast, but a memory that has chosen to linger. An imprint of a person pressed gently into the air of the place they loved. Mischievous knots of chaos belong here too, though they were never truly alive at all, having formed instead from the gathered laughter and unrest of crowded halls. To sort the spirits is to admit that the living world and the world beyond it are not divided by a hard wall, but by a thin and drifting veil, one that the very old and the very sleepy sometimes feel brushing against them like a cool breath in a warm room. Now, having decided what each creature is, the wizarding world turned to a kinder and more practical question. How dangerous might they be, and how gently or how carefully should one approach them? For this, the ministry devised a system as elegant as it is memorable, a ladder of 5 marks, each one a letter X, climbing from the harmless to the impossibly wild. A creature rated with a single X is thoroughly tame, the sort a small child might keep in a pocket or a jar, boring in the most reassuring way. 2 of those marks suggest a creature that is harmless and easily domesticated, a comfortable presence about the home or garden. 3 marks lift us into the realm of things a competent witch or wizard ought to be able to manage without much trouble. Creatures with a little bite or a little sting, but nothing that patience and a steady hand cannot soothe. It is at the 4th mark that the air grows cooler and the voice of the naturalist drops lower. A creature bearing 4 of those crossed letters is dangerous, requiring real skill and specialist knowledge, the kind of beast one does not meet casually on an evening walk. And then there is the 5th and final mark, 4 X's and 1 more, the summit of the whole quiet ladder. A creature rated with 5 is known to be a wizard killer, impossible to train or to domesticate. A being of such power or ferocity that the wisest response is not mastery, but distance and deep respect. There is something almost peaceful in that honesty, in a world that does not pretend it can tame everything, that leaves room for a handful of magnificent, untouchable things to remain exactly as wild as they were made. Yet a system, however clever, is only paper and ink until someone brave and patient goes out into the world to fill it with life. That someone, more than any other, was a mild and unassuming naturalist named Newt Scamander. Where others saw monsters, he saw creatures worthy of understanding. Across long and lonely years, he wandered the far corners of the earth, into rainforests thick with steam, and onto mountainsides raked by wind, crouching in burrows and wading through marshes, watching, always watching, with a curiosity that never curdled into fear. He learned the moods of dragons and the shyness of the smallest hidden things, and he carried them, some of them quite literally, in a battered case that held far more than any case reasonably should. From all that gentle labor came his life's work, the book that turned scattered lore into a single trusted volume, the definitive bestiary that generations of young witches and wizards would carry to school and read by candlelight. He gave each creature its true name and its honest rating, its habits and its home. And he did so with a tenderness that made even the fiercest beast feel, on the page, like a fellow traveler through the same strange and beautiful world. It is his frame we borrow tonight, his patient way of looking, as we prepare to wander from the smallest curiosities to the very greatest of the wizard killers. For that is the journey ahead of us, a slow and easy passage through the whole living menagerie, from the tame to the terrible, from the feathered to the fanged. We will meet creatures who heal and creatures who haunt, creatures who guard treasure and creatures who guard only their own ancient solitude. And there is no better place to begin than at the very top of that ladder, in the company of a beast so deadly that its very gaze was said to end a life, a creature crowned in old whispers as royalty among reptiles. Up next in Chapter 2, the Basilisk, King of Serpents, will uncover how a monster hatched beneath a toad grew into a legend coiled in the dark heart of a hidden chamber, and why even the bravest wizards learned never, ever to look it in the eye. When we closed our last chapter, we had laid the great bestiary open before us, that quiet library of living things where every beast was given its rank and its measure. We had watched the classifiers of the wizarding world sort the gentle from the fearsome, and place each creature upon its shelf like a slow and careful gardener. And near the very top of that ranking, above nearly all others, there rested a single name that even the boldest scholars set down with a hushed hand. Tonight, we let the pages of the bestiary settle, and we turn toward that name, and we speak, in a low and even voice, of the Basilisk, King of Serpents. The story of this creature begins not in some wild and distant forest, but in the mind of a wizard. Long ago, in the old ages of magic, there lived a man remembered as Herpo the Foul, a Greek wizard who walked the earliest roads of the dark arts. He was a maker of terrible things. a man who bent his cleverness toward creation rather than kindness. And among all the works he set loose upon the world, none was more feared, and none endured so long as the serpent he first brought into being. Herpo discovered, through patient and unhappy study, that life could be coaxed into a shape that ought never to have drawn breath. And so the basilisk was born, not from the ordinary weddings of nature, but from a strange and unlikely craft. The manner of its hatching is one of the oldest secrets in the bestiary, and we tell it here gently, the way one tells an old fireside tale to a drowsy child. To wake a basilisk into the world, a wizard must take the egg of a chicken, an ordinary thing found in any farmyard, and set it beneath a toad, where it is kept warm through a long and darkened waiting. From this quiet and humble beginning, from an egg meant to bring forth a soft and clucking bird, there uncoils instead a serpent of enormous size. It is one of the deep wonders of magic, and one of its most sober lessons, that so small and plain a thing may cradle so vast a creature. And vast it truly is. The basilisk grows through the long march of years into a serpent of tremendous length, its body thick as the trunk of an old tree, its scales a deep and mossy green. It does not stop its growing as ordinary animals do. Given time and shelter, it swells ever larger until it might stretch the length of a great hall and more. Its eyes are a brilliant yellow, round and unblinking, and it is upon those eyes that all the old fear of the creature rests. For the basilisk carries within its gaze a power both simple and absolute. To look upon its eyes directly, full and unguarded, is to meet an end at once, quiet and complete, with no struggle and no pain. This is the heart of the serpent's dread, and it is why the wise in every age spoke of the creature with such care. Yet magic, as it so often does, leaves a narrow door open. If the deadly gaze is not met head-on, but only glimpsed by some softer and second means, through the sheen of water, through the surface of a mirror, through the pale reflection thrown back by a ghost or a burnished blade, then its power is gentled. The one who sees it so is not brought to an end, but is instead held still, frozen and quiet as a statue, neither waking nor sleeping until a cure can be found. We might think of it almost as a very long rest, a stillness that pauses a life rather than closing it, waiting patiently to be undone. The basilisk guards its strength in more than its eyes alone. Within its long fangs it carries a venom of rare potency, a poison so strong that few remedies in all the world can answer it. And here the old bestiary offers one of its most tender turnings, for the single antidote to that venom is the tears of a phoenix. It is a thing worth pausing over in the hush of night, that the deadliest gift of the king of serpents should be answered by so soft a mercy as the weeping of the immortal bird. The phoenix, gentle and shining, sheds tears that heal, and those healing tears are the one grace that can draw the basilisk's poison back out of a wound. So the world keeps its balance. For every shadow, a lantern. For the serpent's venom, the phoenix's quiet tears. Great as it is, the basilisk is not without an enemy, and the enemy the old lore names is one of the smallest and homeliest creatures upon any farm. It is the rooster, the common cockerel that stands upon the fence at dawn. The crowing of a rooster, that plain and cheerful sound which greets the first light of morning, is deadly to the king of serpents. No matter how vast the basilisk has grown, no matter how many ages it has slept and swelled beneath the earth, the clear call of a rooster at daybreak is fatal to it. There is a soft justice in this, a reminder that even the mightiest of creatures may be undone by the humblest of songs, and that the ordinary business of a waking farmyard holds a power the dark wizard never truly mastered. And the basilisk lives long, longer by far than the men who make it or the men who fear it. Where a wizard counts his years in scores, the serpent counts its own in centuries. It may lie dormant for hundreds of years, coiled in some deep and lightless place, neither hungry nor hurried, until the slow turning of time and circumstance rouses it once more. This is a creature that measures its life against the lives of castles and kingdoms, patient beyond all patience, sleeping through the rise and fall of many generations. It is this long and dreaming patience that carries us, at last, beneath the floors of a place we know well. For of all the basilisks that the old craft ever woke into the world, one holds a particular place in the memory of the wizarding world, and that is the Basilisk of Slytherin. In the founding days of Hogwarts, when the four great founders raised their school upon the northern hills, one of them, Salazar Slytherin, was said to have set a hidden chamber deep below the stone. And within that chamber of secrets, sealed away from every eye, he left behind a serpent of his own, a basilisk meant to slumber through the long years and wait. We might picture it now, in the tranquil dark of our imagining, that immense green serpent curled in the still water and cool shadow far beneath the busy corridors above. For century upon century, it rested there, while students walked the halls overhead, while the seasons turned the windows from gold to gray and back again, while the castle filled with laughter and lessons and the ordinary warmth of passing years. The serpent slept on, unhurried, unaging, dreaming its slow serpent dreams, beneath a school that had all but forgotten it was there. It is a strange and quieting thought that so vast a creature could lie so near to so much life, and disturb none of it, waiting only for the one voice that might someday call it forth. And so the king of serpents keeps its long watch below, patient and enormous and still, a wonder of dark craft resting in the deep. It stands, in our slow bestiary, as perhaps the greatest of the serpents. Yet it is not the greatest of all magical beasts, for above even the basilisk, in size and in flame, and in the awe they command, there rise the dragons, those winged and ancient sovereigns of fire, whose many kinds spread across the whole of the wizarding world. Up next in Chapter 3, Dragons, the 10 Great Breeds, we'll uncover how the wizarding world came to know these vast and fiery creatures, from the icebound peaks of the north to the warm hills of the south, and how the keepers of magic learned to name and number the 10 great kinds that rule the wide company of dragonkind. Before we leave the memory of the basilisk behind, let us hold it for one moment longer, that great serpent coiled in its silence beneath the school, a creature so terrible that a single glance could still the heart. It was a beast of dark corridors and hidden water, a thing that thrived where no light reached. And yet, as we let its image soften and drift away into the dark, we turn our thoughts toward a very different kind of monster, one that does not hide at all. Where the basilisk lurked unseen, this next creature blazes across the open sky, wreathed in smoke and fire, watched by every eye that dares to look up. We rise now from the cold stone of the dungeons into the wide and windy air, and we come to the grandest beasts of all, to dragons, the 10 great breeds. Dragons are, without question, the most famous of all magical creatures, and perhaps the most feared. In the ancient books of magical zoology, they carry the highest possible rating, a classification of 5 crosses, a mark reserved only for those beasts so dangerous that no ordinary witch or wizard could ever hope to tame them. It is a rating shared by only a small and dreadful company of creatures, and the dragon stands at the very front of that company, immense and unbowed. For all the cleverness of wizardkind, for all the spells and charms and centuries of study, the dragon has never truly been domesticated. It cannot be kept as a pet, cannot be trained to obedience, cannot be trusted for even a single hour. Those who work with dragons do not master them. They learn, instead, to move carefully in their presence, to earn a fragile and watchful peace, and never to forget for one heartbeat what they are standing beside. There are 10 breeds that the wizarding world formally recognizes. 10 kinds of dragons spread across the wild and lonely places of the earth, each with its own shape and color and temper. Let us walk gently through them now, one by one, the way a traveler might wander through a long gallery of sleeping giants, pausing before each in turn. We begin with the Hungarian horntail, which many believe to be the most dangerous of them all. It is a creature of black, scaled hide, with yellow eyes that gleam like molten metal and rows of bronze horns crowning its head. Its tail is long and armored, tipped with cruel spikes, and it can throw its fire farther than nearly any other dragon, a jet of flame that reaches out across a great distance. For all its ferocity, there is a terrible beauty in it, in the way the light catches those dark scales, in the slow and deliberate sweep of that spiked tail. Next we come to the common Welsh green, a gentler soul by comparison, at least in reputation. It is green as the hills it hails from, blending softly into the mossy slopes and quiet valleys of Wales, where it nests among the rocks and prefers, whenever it can, to hunt sheep and to keep well away from people. Its roar is oddly musical, and its fire comes in thin, narrow jets. Of all the breeds, it is among the least troublesome, content to live in peace if left in peace. The Swedish short snout is a striking silvery blue, a color like moonlight on cold water, and it dwells in the wild and uninhabited mountains of the far north. Its flame burns a brilliant blue, so hot that it can reduce wood and bone to ash in an instant. Yet, because it lives so far from human settlements, it has caused fewer deaths than many of its cousins, and its beautiful skin has long been prized for the making of protective gloves and shields. From the east comes the Chinese fireball, sometimes called the lion dragon, a scarlet and smooth-scaled beast with a striking fringe of golden spikes about its snub-nosed face and bulging eyes. When it is angered, it breathes not a stream, but great blooming mushrooms of flame, and its scales, ground fine, are valued in ancient remedies. It is aggressive, yes, but among dragons, it is thought to be curiously tolerant of its own kind, willing at times to share its territory with as many as 2 others. The Norwegian ridgeback resembles the horntail in many ways, though it wears distinctive black ridges along its spine, and its eggs and the young that hatch from them have long been the stuff of quiet legend among those who study these creatures. It is unusual, too, in that it takes to eating water-dwelling creatures, and its venom makes it a formidable hunter. Then there is the Romanian longhorn, dark green and crowned with long, glittering golden horns. Horns so treasured that the breed was hunted near to ruin before careful protection helped its numbers slowly recover. It is fitting, then, that the most celebrated of all the world's dragon sanctuaries should stand in the wild mountains of Romania. The Hebridean black is Britain's other native dragon, darker and fiercer than its Welsh neighbor. It is a rough-scaled creature with bright purple eyes and a line of shallow, ridged spines along its back, its tail ending in an arrow-shaped tip. It needs a great deal of territory to roam, and it has long been tended across the centuries by a single devoted wizarding family. From the forests of the far south comes the Peruvian vipertooth, the smallest of all the breeds, and also the swiftest in flight. It is copper-colored, with short black ridges and a taste, unfortunately for humans, so much so that its numbers once had to be gently controlled to keep the peace. The Ukrainian ironbelly is the largest dragon of them all, a gray and towering giant whose weight is almost beyond imagining, whose talons are as long as a person's arm, For all its size, it is slower and more ponderous than the smaller breeds, and there is something almost mournful in its vastness. A beast built on the scale of mountains. And last we come to the Antipodean opali, perhaps the loveliest of the 10. It dwells in the valleys of the far southern world, and its scales shimmer with a pearly, iridescent sheen, its eyes glittering and multicolored and without pupils, like polished opals. Unusually among dragons, it is not especially aggressive, and its flame burns a strange and vivid red. These are the 10, then, scattered across the lonely corners of the world. And because they can never be truly tamed, wizardkind long ago learned that the kindest and wisest course was not to conquer them, but to shelter them. And so there are dragon reserves, vast and guarded sanctuaries hidden in remote wilderness, where these great beasts may live and breed away from human harm. The most famous of all lies in the mountains of Romania, and it is there that the dragon keepers do their patient, dangerous work. Among those keepers is one whose name we may fondly remember, a young man named Charlie Weasley, second of the red-haired Weasley children who left school to devote his life to these creatures. He is by all accounts gentle and unafraid, more at ease among dragons than among crowds, and he has spent his years tending to their wounds and guarding their nests in the cold Romanian hills. Yet dragons have wandered into the wider story of the wizarding world in other ways too. There was a time when a great tournament brought 4 young champions together, and the very first task set before them was to face a nesting mother dragon and slip past her to claim a golden egg. It was a Hungarian horntail that guarded one of those eggs, and the memory of that fire against the sky has never quite faded. And deep beneath the streets of London, in the oldest vaults of the Wizarding Bank, another dragon lived out its long captivity in the dark. Pale and half-blind, kept as a guardian over mountains of gold, it knew nothing of open air until, at last, it was freed to climb into the sky above the city. So the dragon leaves us, rising and turning on its great wings, growing smaller against the clouds until it is only a dark shape and then nothing at all. But fire, in the world of magic, is not always a thing of danger. Sometimes it is a thing of healing, of renewal, of quiet and impossible return. Up next in Chapter 4, The Phoenix and the Flame Reborn will uncover how a single bird can die in a burst of fire and rise again from its own soft ashes, and why its tears carry a magic older and gentler than any flame a dragon ever breathed. We leave the dragons behind now, those vast and thunderous shapes that filled the last of our wandering, and we let their smoke thin into a paler sky, where the dragon was fury made flesh, all scale and hunger, and the crash of enormous wings. The creature we drift toward now is its quiet opposite, a thing of fire that heals rather than harms. So let the roar fade, let the mountains soften into distance, and let us turn our slow attention to a smaller warmth, to the story we might call The Phoenix and the Flame Reborn. Picture, if you would, a bird no larger than a swan. That is the whole of its size, and yet nothing about it feels small. Its feathers burn with a deep and living crimson, the red of embers seen through half-closed eyes, and along its wings and its long sweeping tail run threads of pure gold, as though someone had woven the last light of a sunset into the plumage of a single creature. Its talons and its beak gleam gold as well, and its eyes hold a soft black shine, ancient and knowing, and entirely without menace. To look upon a phoenix is to feel no fear at all. It does not crouch to strike. It does not guard a horde beneath a mountain. It simply is, perched and patient, and the sight of it settles something in the chest that we did not know had been unsettled. The phoenix carries within it the oldest and strangest of gifts, the gift that gives the creature its name across 1,000 years of wonder. It does not die as other things die. When its long life at last grows heavy, when its feathers dim and its body slows, the phoenix does not simply fade into stillness and vanish. Instead, it bursts into flame. In one bright and silent moment, it becomes a small blaze upon its perch, a flare of red and gold, and then it is gone. And where it stood there is only a soft gray heap of ash, warm and quiet as a hearth at the end of an evening. And here is the tender miracle at the heart of the tale. From that ash, in a day or two, a movement stirs. A tiny head lifts. A newborn phoenix, wrinkled and small and impossibly alive, rises from the remains of the one that was. It is the same bird and a new bird at once, carrying forward all the years behind it into all the years ahead. Nothing is truly lost. Everything is renewed. This is why the wise have always looked to the phoenix when they wished to speak of hope. For it is the living answer to the fear of endings, a promise that from the softest gray ash a warm new life can always climb. There is more to marvel at, and each wonder is gentler than the last. The phoenix weeps, and its tears are unlike any other water in the world. They have the power to heal. A wound that would fester and darken, a hurt too deep for ordinary medicine, will close in quiet beneath the fall of phoenix tears. Even certain venoms, the kind that carry a slow and creeping ruin, lose their grip when those tears touch the skin. Imagine a creature whose very sorrow is a mercy, whose grief pours out not as harm, but as healing, wetting the brow of the suffering and drawing the poison back out into the light. There is a deep peace in that thought, that even weeping might be a form of kindness, that tears themselves might mend what the world has broken. The phoenix is gentle, yet it is not weak. Its strength is quietly immense. For all its modest size, it can lift and carry loads many times heavier than itself, bearing burdens through the air that would ground a larger and coarser bird. It rides the currents of the sky with an ease that seems almost thoughtful, unhurried, sure of its way. And it can vanish and reappear in a small flash of flame, moving from one place to another as simply as we might turn a page, so that no wall and no distance can truly keep it from those it loves. And it does love. This may be the most moving of all its qualities. A phoenix, once it gives its loyalty, gives it wholly and without reserve. It will come when it is needed. It will stay when others flee. Its devotion does not waver with danger or with time. And its song, its song is a thing that the brave have long treasured. For the cry of the phoenix is not shrill or mournful, but rich and low and full of warmth, and it swells the heart with courage. Those who hear it in a dark hour feel their fear grow small, and their resolve grow tall. The pure of heart are strengthened by that music, lifted by it, reminded by it that they are not alone. It is a lullaby of a braver kind, one that does not send you to sleep so much as it steadies you to stand. There was one such phoenix whose name has passed into the quiet legends of the wizarding world, a bird called Fawkes. He belonged, if belonging is even the right word for so free a creature, to Albus Dumbledore, the gentle old headmaster of Hogwarts, and the two of them shared a bond deep and easy and unspoken. Fawkes lived in the headmaster's study, a bright small fire of a bird upon a golden perch, and he came and went as he pleased. He wept his healing tears when they were needed most. He carried heavy burdens to safety when all other roads had closed. He sang his song of courage into the deepest shadows, and where his music reached, hope reached with it. And when at last the old wizard's long story drew toward its close, Fawkes did what phoenixes do. He grieved, and then he carried that grief onward. For a phoenix teaches by its very nature that even the greatest of endings is only another beginning wearing a quieter face. The gift of the phoenix reaches even into the hearts of wands, for within certain wands, hidden at the very core, lies a single feather given freely by a phoenix, and such wands are said to be among the most loyal and the most powerful of all, though they choose their owners with a will of their own. One phoenix, in particular, gave 2 feathers in its long life, only 2, from the same red and golden breast. And by a turn of fate that no one planned, those 2 feathers came to rest inside 2 wands that would one day be raised against each other, the wand of a boy who lived and the wand of the wizard who hunted him. Twin cores, born of a single bird, brothers in their deepest nature, even as the hands that held them stood on opposite sides of everything. There is a strange and tender symmetry in that, a reminder woven quietly into the wood that even those set against each other may share a common source. A single warm feather, a single flame. So let this be the shape we carry with us into sleep, the swan-sized bird of crimson and gold, the small bright blaze that is never truly an ending, the tears that heal, the song that heartens, the loyalty that does not fail. The phoenix asks nothing of us but that we remember its lesson, that renewal follows every close, that warmth waits inside every heap of ash, that we may rise again softer and lighter than before. And on that gentle promise we can rest, the flame reborn glowing low behind our closed eyes, patient, faithful, unafraid. Yet not every wondrous creature of this world burns and rises from fire. Some are stitched together from 2 proud animals into one, half eagle and half horse, fierce of eye and courteous of heart, demanding respect before they will let a soul draw near. And others still are horses winged and pale, drawing carriages we cannot always see. Up next in Chapter 5, Hippogriffs and the Winged Horses, we'll uncover how these noble half and half creatures bow to those who honor them, and how the great horses of the sky carry their secret cargo through the night. We linger for one last moment beside the phoenix, that ember of a bird whose life is a slow circle of fire and rebirth, forever rising from its own ashes into a softer dawn. Its song fades now, warm and low, a lullaby carried away on the night air. And as that flame dims to a glowing coal in the memory, another shape gathers at the edge of the firelight, larger and stranger, half feather and half hide, folding great wings against a body built for both the sky and the field. We leave the fire behind us, and we walk into the story of the hippogriffs and the winged horses, creatures of proud bearing and quiet grandeur, keepers of an old courtesy that the wild has never forgotten. Picture a hippogriff standing at the edge of a forest, clearing in the last gray light of afternoon. From the waist forward, it wears the form of a giant eagle, a head crowned with a curved and gleaming beak, eyes of a fierce and burning orange, talons the length of a grown person's hand, each one able to open the earth like soft bread. Great wings sweep back from its shoulders, feathered in colors that shift with the breed, some the deep brown of turned soil, some the smoky blue of a storm about to break, some the pale rose of the sky just before the stars arrive. And then, where the feathers give way, the body becomes a horse, a broad and powerful hindquarter, a long tail, hooves that press deep prints into the mud. The 2 halves meet without a seam, as though the world had simply decided that eagle and horse were always meant to be one animal, and had drawn them together while no one was watching. The hippogriff is a creature of enormous dignity, and its whole way of moving in the world is shaped by that dignity. It does not rush. It does not fawn. It carries itself the way old kings are said to have carried themselves, certain of its own worth and unimpressed by the noise of others. And so those who wished to come near a hippogriff learned, long ago, the one rule that governs every meeting. You must bow. You approach slowly, you meet the great orange eyes, and you bend from the waist, low and unhurried, and then you wait. The hippogriff studies you. It weighs whatever it is that hippogriffs weigh in the hearts of those who stand before them. And if it finds you honest, it lowers its own proud head in return, folding its front legs, dipping the fierce beak toward the ground, and in that shared bow, a trust is made. Only then may you touch it. Only then might it permit you, if it chooses, to climb onto its back and be carried up into the wind. To refuse the bow, or to hurry it, or to turn your eyes away in fear, is to insult a creature that does not forgive insults easily. The courtesy must be true. The hippogriff can always tell. At Hogwarts, in the paddock beyond the edge of the Forbidden Forest, there lived a hippogriff whose name has become part of the school's gentle folklore. He was called Buckbeak, a steel-gray creature with feathers like polished slate and eyes bright as new coins. And he belonged, in the loose way that wild things ever belong to anyone, to the great and tender giant of a man who kept the grounds and loved every beast that walked or crawled or flew across them. Hagrid raised Buckbeak with the patient care he gave to all his creatures, brushing the mingled coat of feather and hair, feeding him dead ferrets from a bucket, letting him stretch his wings in long, lazy loops above the pumpkin patch. And when Hagrid first brought Buckbeak before a class of young students, it was the bow that he taught them first. The slow bend, the steady gaze, the waiting. Buckbeak's story took a darker turn for a while, as the old stories sometimes do, for he was wrongly blamed for a small injury and condemned by frightened officials who did not understand the pride of hippogriffs. Yet we need not dwell in that shadow tonight, because the tale bends back toward light. Buckbeak was spared. He was carried away in secret on a night lit by a great silver moon, lifted into freedom by those who cared for him. And in the end, he lived on, sometimes hidden, sometimes soaring, a proud gray shape crossing the face of the moon while the world below slept. He remains, in the memory of Hogwarts, a reminder that dignity is worth defending, and that a creature which asks only for a bow asks for something very small and very fair. From the hippogriffs, with their eagle hearts and their fierce courtesy, our path drifts on to their gentler cousins in the family of magical flight, the winged horses. These are horses in the shape you already know, long of leg and graceful of neck. But from their shoulders unfold broad feathered wings that let them rise from a gallop into the open air. They come in several breeds, and each has its own quiet character, its own place in the wizarding world. Grandest of all are the Abraxans, enormous palomino horses the size of small elephants, their coats a pale and shining gold, their manes the color of cream poured into sunlight. It is the Abraxans who draw the great powder blue carriage of Beauxbatons, that famous school far to the south, and to see them arrive is to see something out of an old painting. 12 of these giant golden horses come down out of the clouds in harness, their wings beating slow and wide, their hooves the size of dinner plates, dragging behind them a carriage as large as a house. They are said to drink nothing but single malt whiskey, these proud golden giants, and they need a strong and steady hand to manage, yet in flight they are calm, majestic, unhurried, moving through the sky like a slow tide of gold. Smaller and swifter is the Granian, a gray winged horse prized for its speed, able to cross great distances at a pace that leaves the wind behind. And there is the Aethonan, a breed of chestnut coat and steady temper, one of the most common winged horses in these islands, valued for its endurance and its gentle willingness to be trained. Each of them, Abraxan and Granian and Athanon, shares that same dreamlike quality, the sight of a horse doing the one thing horses were never meant to do, lifting free of the ground and folding the earth away beneath its wings. There is a peace in these creatures that settles over anyone who watches them long enough. The hippogriff teaches us the beauty of a bow, the quiet dignity of asking and being answered. The winged horses teach us the calm of great strength held lightly, of power that carries rather than crushes. Together they belong to the daylight side of the magical menagerie, proud and visible, golden and gray and slate, moving through skies that anyone might look up and see. Yet not all winged steeds are so easily seen. There is one breed that draws no carriage in gold, that asks for no bow, that moves through the world half hidden from ordinary eyes. Black as a starless night, patient and gentle in their strange way, they carry the coaches of Hogwarts up from the station, and most students never know they are there at all, for only certain eyes can look upon them. To see these creatures, one must first have seen something no child should ever have to see. Up next, in Chapter 6, Thestrals, the Steeds of the Unseen, will uncover why these shadowy horses remain invisible to so many. What quiet wisdom the wizarding world once misjudged as an omen of doom, and how a creature born of loss can become, in the end, one of the tenderest guardians of the night. We linger a moment longer with the winged horses and the proud hippogriffs we came to know in the pages before this one, those creatures who carried the sky on their backs and asked only for a bow in return. They were beings of feather and muscle, warm to the touch, alive in the ordinary way that horses and eagles are alive. And yet, as we drift onward through the quiet menagerie of the wizarding world, we come now to a cousin of these flying steeds that is stranger and softer than any of them, a creature stitched not from feathers but from shadow and bone. We come, at last, to the Thestrals, the steeds of the unseen. Picture, for a moment, a horse. Now, let the flesh fall away from it like mist lifting off a field at dawn, until what remains is the long architecture of the skeleton, the ribs curving like the timbers of an old ship, the spine drawn taut beneath skin so black and so thin that it seems less like hide than like the memory of night itself. Their eyes are wide and white and without any pupil that you could name, and they glow with a pale, milky patience, the way a distant lamp glows through fog. From the shoulders spread great leathery wings, broad and bat-like, folding down against the body when they rest, and opening wide when they climb into the air. To look upon a Thestral is to look upon something that seems half here and half elsewhere. A horse that has walked a little way past the edge of the ordinary world and come quietly back again. Now here is the tender heart of the matter, the thing that has made these creatures the subject of so much whispered fear. Most people cannot see a Thestral at all. To the greater part of the wizarding world, the carriages they draw appear to roll along on their own, moving through the dark as though pulled by nothing, and the space where the Thestrals stand seems empty air. Only certain people can see them, and the difference between those who see and those who do not is a difference carved by grief. A Thestral becomes visible only to a person who has seen death, who has watched a living being pass out of life, and who has, in the slow turning of the days that follow, come to understand and accept what they witnessed. It is not enough merely to be near death. The sight comes only once the heart has done its quiet work, once loss has settled into knowledge. It is easy to hear that and to feel a small cold shiver, and easier still to imagine why so many wizards and witches have spoken of Thestrals as omens of misfortune, as harbingers of dark things, as unlucky creatures best avoided. For centuries their reputation has been a shadowed one. To be able to see them at all was taken as a mark of sorrow, and so the creatures themselves were blamed for the sorrow, as though they had caused the very deaths that opened the eyes of those who beheld them. People feared them the way people often fear whatever reminds them of endings. But let us set that old dread down here, on the soft ground between us, and look at the thing more truly. A Thestral is not a cause of death. It is only visible to those who have already met it and made their peace. Seeing a Thestral is not a curse laid upon the grieving. It is, if anything, a gentle sign that the heart has grown. It means a person has looked upon the hardest fact of living, the fact that all things end, and has not turned away, but has carried that knowing forward into a wider understanding of the world. The sight of a Thestral is the sight of the person who can now perceive what was always there, standing, patient, in the dark, waiting to be seen. Far from an omen of misfortune, it is a quiet mark of understanding, the world revealing one of its softer secrets only to those who have earned the calm to receive it. And the creatures themselves, once you meet them past all that borrowed fear, are among the gentlest beings you could hope to know. Thestrals are not fierce. They do not charge or bite or bear ill will toward those who approach them with an open hand. They are loyal, deeply and steadily loyal, bonding to those who care for them, and returning kindness with a devotion that asks for very little. There is a serenity in them, a slow and grave patience, the manner of an animal that has nothing left to prove and nothing at all to fear. They stand in the shadows of the forest and wait, and when they are needed, they come, and they carry whoever climbs upon their bony backs without complaint into the widening dark. One of the great gifts of the Thestral is a sense of direction so keen it seems almost like a form of knowing. Give a Thestral a destination, even one it has never traveled to before, even one spoken aloud to it in the softest voice, and it will find the way there through night and distance without hesitation. They fly swiftly, far more swiftly than their thin frames might suggest, and they hold their course as steadily as a compass needle holds to the north. To ride one is to be carried by something that never seems to doubt where it is going, and there is a strange comfort in that, in trusting your passage to a creature that cannot lose its way. At Hogwarts there lives a whole herd of these tender shadows, dwelling deep within the forbidden forest that borders the castle grounds. It is one of the only domesticated herds of Thestrals known in all of Britain, and the school has long relied upon them for a humble and daily task. When the students arrive at the little station beyond the village and must be brought up the long, dark road to the castle, it is the Thestrals who draw the carriages. Year after year they wait in their harnesses beneath the trees, patient as ever, and they pull the newcomers and the returning alike up toward the golden windows of the castle, unseen by nearly all who ride behind them. Most of the children never know they are there. They believe the carriages move by magic alone, and in a sense, they are not wrong, for the Thestrals are a kind of magic, the living, breathing kind that hides in plain sight. The keeper of the grounds cares for this herd with a fondness that many would find hard to understand, feeding them and watching over their foals, for Thestrals have a taste that unsettles the squeamish. They are meat-eaters, these skeletal horses, drawn to the scent of blood, and they will gather where fresh meat has been laid out for them, tearing at it with a quiet, unhurried appetite. It is a habit that sounds grim when spoken plainly, and yet there is nothing cruel in it. It is only their nature, the way owls hunt mice and cats stalk sparrows. The keeper knows this, and he brings them what they need, and they love him for it in their still and solemn way. There came a night when a small band of young friends, Harry among them, needed to travel a great distance in secret and in haste, all the way to the heart of the Ministry of Magic in distant London. They had no broomsticks enough and no safer road to take, and so they turned to the herd waiting in the trees. Some of them could see the creatures plainly, their eyes long since opened by loss, and some could not see them at all, and had to climb onto the empty-seeming air and trust that something solid and warm and living was truly there beneath them. The Thestrals bore them all the same, told only where they wished to go. The herd rose into the night sky and carried the children unerringly across the dark miles, gentle and sure, asking nothing, delivering them safely to the place their hearts had chosen. It was a ride upon the steeds of the unseen, and those who took it never forgot the tender strangeness of it, the feeling of being carried by kindness they could not always see. And so the Thestrals stand as a lesson wrapped in shadow, a reminder that the things we fear most are often the gentlest of all, and that to see clearly, even into sorrow, is a quiet kind of grace. But the forest holds other creatures whose bond with darkness runs deeper still. Beings caught between the human and the wild, ruled by the turning of the moon above the trees. Up next in Chapter 7, Werewolves and the Curse of the Full Moon, we'll uncover how an ancient affliction reshapes a person's body and soul beneath the silver light, and how tenderness and understanding can soften even the oldest of curses. We leave the Thestrals behind us now, those patient winged shapes that only the grieving can see, and we let their quiet fade into the trees. They belong to the borderland between what is seen and what is felt, and they carry no fear in their bones, only a strange loyalty to those who have known loss. As we walk on from them, we pass out of the world of creatures, born gentle, and into the story of a creature made. A creature shaped not by nature, but by sorrow. For there is a being in this world who was once wholly human, who laughs and reads and loves as we do, and who is changed only by the turning of the sky. This is the tale of werewolves and the curse of the full moon, and we will tell it slowly, and we will tell it with kindness. To understand the werewolf, we must first set down the fear that stories usually carry with them. In the ordinary telling, the werewolf is a monster of the night, a thing of teeth and terror. Yet the truth of it, in the wizarding world, is far softer and far sadder than any campfire tale. A werewolf is not a demon, and not a beast by choice. A werewolf is a person, a witch or a wizard, sometimes a child, who has been bitten by another of their kind, and who now carries a change inside them that they never asked for and cannot undo. For most of the month they are simply themselves. They wake and dress and worry over small things. They keep friends, they keep secrets, and they carry a weight that others rarely see. The curse works by the moon, and only by the moon. On every night, save one, the person lives untouched, an ordinary soul with an unusual burden. But when the moon grows round and full and hangs low and heavy over the hills, the change comes upon them, whether they wish it or not. The bones lengthen, the shape shifts, and the human form gives way to something four-legged and wild. What makes this so tender a tragedy is not the shape of the wolf itself, but what is lost inside it. In those hours, the human mind slips away. The person who was reading by candlelight an hour before is gone, and in their place moves a creature that does not remember its own name, its own gentleness, or the faces of the people it loves. When the dawn returns and the moon sinks, the change reverses, and the person wakes once more, often aching, often alone, and always aware of the danger they became while they slept inside the wolf. It is this loss of the mind that lies at the heart of the sorrow. A werewolf transformed is not cruel by intention. There is no malice in the change. Yet the wolf that wears their body has no memory of love and no understanding of harm, and so those who carry the curse must guard the world against themselves. For long centuries, they had no help at all. They could only lock themselves away, in cellars or in shuttered rooms or in the deep of forests, and wait for the long night to pass. Many spent the hours of the full moon in cages of their own making, biting and clawing at the empty air, and woke to wounds they had given themselves, because there was nothing else for the wolf to reach. Then, in time, the healers of the wizarding world found a small mercy, and it changed everything for those who could reach it. They brewed a draught known as the Wolfsbane Potion, a difficult and delicate thing to make, its ingredients demanding and its steps unforgiving. When a werewolf drinks it in the days before the full moon, the potion does not stop the change of the body. The bones still shift, the shape still turns, but the mind is allowed to stay. The person keeps their own thoughts inside the wolf. They remember who they are. They can curl up in a warm corner and wait out the night as harmless as a sleeping dog, dreaming their own dreams, holding on to their own gentleness until morning brings them back. It is not a cure, and it is not freedom, but it is peace of a kind, and for those who had known only terror and shame, that peace is a great and quiet gift. We should linger for a moment on the shame, because it is part of the story and it teaches us something. In the wizarding world, as in ours, those who are different are too often feared, and the werewolf became a figure of suspicion and dread. People spoke of them in low voices. Doors that were open to others closed to them. Work grew hard to find, and homes grew hard to keep, and the kindness that any person deserves was withheld from them for a thing they never chose. The curse of the full moon was, in the end, only the smaller half of their burden. The heavier half was the coldness of others. The way a whole life could be narrowed by a single word spoken with fear. And yet, against all of that, there were those who carried the curse and stayed gentle anyway, and one of them we know well. His name is Remus Lupin. He was a boy when he was bitten, far too young to understand what had been taken from him, and he grew up learning to hide the truth from nearly everyone he met. He was clever and warm and quietly funny, the sort of person who noticed when others were sad. In time he became a teacher, and a very good one, patient with the frightened and generous with the slow. His students trusted him without knowing why, and those who did learn his secret found, to their own surprise, that the man they knew was unchanged by it. Remus Lupin lived his whole life beneath the shadow of the moon, and he answered that shadow not with bitterness, but with tenderness, which is perhaps the bravest thing a wounded person can do. But we would not be honest if we spoke only of gentleness, for the curse has a darker face as well, and his name is Fenrir Greyback. Where Remus hid his condition and grieved it, Fenrir embraced the wolf and made a weapon of it. He was cruel by choice, not by change, and he sought out the young especially, hoping to spread the curse and to raise a generation who would know only savagery. He is the shadow at the edge of this tale, the reminder that the same affliction can be borne in wholly different ways. Yet even here the kit of compassion holds, for what Fenrir shows us is not that the curse makes monsters, but that a person may choose what to become in spite of it. Remus chose kindness. Fenrir chose cruelty. The moon gave them both the same wound, and the difference between them was made not by the wolf, but by the heart. So let us leave the werewolves as we found them, not as creatures of horror, but as people carrying a hard and lonely thing, some of them with grace. Let us remember the boy who became a teacher, the potion brewed by patient hands to keep a mind from slipping away, and the long nights waited through in warm and shuttered rooms until the kind light of morning came. There is a strange peace in this story once the fear is set aside, the peace of understanding, which softens everything it touches. and as our path bends away from the moonlit hills, it begins to slope downward, toward water, toward a still black surface that holds the reflection of the stars. Up next in Chapter 8, the Merpeople of the Black Lake will uncover the hidden people who dwell beneath that dark and silent water. The songs they sing in a language no dry throat can shape, and the quiet villages that rest far below the waves, where no moon ever reaches. When the werewolf finally slips back into the trees, its long night of restlessness behind it, we let the memory of that lonely creature settle and soften. The werewolf belonged to the borderland between two shapes, half of the human world and half of the wild, forever caught between the moon and the morning. Yet there are other creatures who feel no such division, who have never known a moment of confusion about who or what they are. They live entirely in their own element, whole and unhurried, and they have done so for longer than any wizard can measure. To meet them, we do not climb into the mountains or wait beneath a full moon. Instead, we walk down a gentle slope of wet grass, past the reeds and the sleeping willows, until we come to the still dark water at the very edge of Hogwarts. Here, beneath a surface as smooth as poured glass, live the Merpeople of the Black Lake. The Black Lake is one of the oldest and quietest features of the school grounds, a wide expanse of deep cold water that mirrors the towers of the castle on calm evenings. Students see only its surface, the ripples of the giant squid, the small boats that carry the first years toward the lights on their very first night. But far below, where the light thins to a soft green haze and then to a deeper blue, an entire civilization goes about its slow and ancient life. The Merpeople are not a legend told to frighten children. They are a true and intelligent people, so intelligent and so self-aware that the wizarding world has long classified them not as beasts, but as beings, granting them the same recognition given to goblins, to house-elves, and to wizards themselves. They think, they build, they remember, and they pass their history from one generation to the next in the deep and patient way of those who are in no hurry at all. If we could hold our breath and drift down among them, we might be surprised, for the Merpeople look very little like the mermaids of old sailor stories. In the romantic legends of the Muggle world, mermaids are imagined as beautiful maidens with flowing golden hair and soft pale faces, half woman and half fish, singing sweetly upon sunlit rocks. The true Merpeople of the North are something stranger, and in their own way, far more wonderful. Their skin is a smooth, silvery gray, the color of the water itself on a clouded day. Their eyes are a pale, luminous yellow, wide and unblinking, made for seeing in the dim underwater dark. Their hair floats around them in long, wild strands the color of deep green weed, drifting with every current, so that a merperson at rest seems to be crowned with a slow-moving garden. Their teeth are broken and yellowed, and in their hands they often carry spears fashioned from the bones and stones of the lake bed. To a wizard raised on gentle picture books, they may seem fierce at first glance, but there is nothing cruel in them. They are simply themselves, shaped perfectly for the cold and the deep, as much a part of the lake as the reeds and the silt and the wandering fish. Down in the heart of the lake stands their village, and it is here that the true character of the Merpeople reveals itself. They are not wild wanderers, but settled folk, dwelling in rough stone houses draped with weed, their windows glowing faintly in the murk. Around these houses they keep gardens of underwater plants, and they herd the giant squid and other creatures of the deep, much as a shepherd might tend a flock upon a hillside. The village is watched over by a leader known as the Merchiftiness, a figure of great age and authority whose word guides the whole community. She wears her rank in the ornaments of stone and shell woven into her hair, and the other Merpeople gather around her in the open spaces between the houses. a gathering as ordered and peaceful as any village council held above the waves. To look upon their home is to understand that they are a people with customs and roles and quiet pride, living a life we can only glimpse from the surface. The Merpeople have their own language, and it is a tongue quite unlike any spoken by wizards. It is called Mermish, and it is beautifully suited to the water in which it lives. Beneath the surface, Mermish is said to be rich and expressive, full of song and meaning, a language in which the Merpeople can speak of their history, their weather, and their long, slow thoughts. Yet above the water, in the ordinary air of the human world, Mermish undergoes a strange transformation. A merperson lifted into the air can only produce a harsh and grating screech, a sound like tearing that carries none of the grace it holds below. For this reason, only a rare few wizards have ever learned to truly speak with the Merpeople, and to do so, one must meet them in their own element, ducking beneath the surface where their voices become song once more. There is something tender in this, the idea of a whole people whose music can only be heard by those willing to enter their world on their own terms. The Merpeople of the Black Lake are only one branch of a great and scattered family, for such beings live in waters all across the world, and they take many forms. In the cold seas around Scotland and Ireland dwell the Selkies, gentler cousins whose stories drift into Muggle folklore. Far to the warm south, in the blue waters of Greece and the ancient Mediterranean, live the Sirens, whose beauty matches the old romantic legends and whose voices are said to carry a haunting sweetness. Every region shapes its own Merpeople, and so no two communities look quite alike, some fair and some strange, some warm and some cold, each one perfectly formed for the sea or lake or river that is their home. The gray-skinned people of Hogwarts, hardy and watchful, are simply the northern kind, suited to their deep and chilly water. Across the whole wide world, wherever the water runs deep, some form of this ancient people is very likely to be found, going about lives that the land dwellers above will never fully know. Now and then, the human world above and the water world below are brought briefly together, and one such meeting became part of the great history of the school. During the famous tournament that once drew champions from 3 magical schools, the second of the 3 great tasks was set within the domain of the Merpeople themselves. The champions were asked to descend into the cold green depths of the Black Lake, past the weed and the shadowed houses, into the very heart of the merfolk village, to recover something precious that had been placed there in safekeeping. For a short while, the calm underwater world became a place of quiet watching, as the Merpeople observed the strange air-breathing visitors moving slowly through their streets. It was one of the few times that wizards were invited, however briefly, into the serene and secret country beneath the surface, and it left behind a lasting sense of wonder at the people who live there always. And so, we leave the Merpeople to their slow and peaceful world, their green hair drifting in the dark, their village glowing faintly far below the boats and the towers, their old chieftainess keeping watch over a life older than the castle itself. But the grounds of Hogwarts hold many keepers of ancient wisdom, and not all of them dwell in the water. Some walk on 4 hooves beneath the trees, reading fortunes in the turning of the sky. Up next, in Chapter 9, Centaurs, Keepers of the Forest Stars, we'll uncover how the proud watchers of the Forbidden Forest read the movements of the heavens, and why they hold themselves so far apart from the affairs of wizardkind. We leave behind the drowned song of the Merpeople now, that slow music trembling up through the cold green water of the Black Lake, and we let it fade the way a lullaby fades when sleep finally takes hold. The lake grows quiet beneath us. Its surface settles into a sheet of dark glass, and above it the night deepens, and the first stars come pricking through. Follow those stars now, up and away from the water, over the reeds and the rushes and the long silver shore, toward the great wall of trees that stands at the edge of everything the castle knows. For the Merpeople kept their secrets in the deep, in a world without sky. But the beings we turn to next keep their secrets in the sky itself. They lift their eyes where the merfolk could not, and they read the heavens the way a scholar reads a beloved page. These are the Centaurs, keepers of the forest stars, and it is into their quiet country that we wander now. The forbidden forest waits at the boundary of the Hogwarts grounds, a vast and ancient wood that rolls away for miles into hills no student is meant to cross. By day, it is a place of green shade and slow rivers, of mossed stones and fallen giants of oak. By night, it becomes something older and stiller, a cathedral of trunks with the sky laid open in the clearings like windows in a high roof. And it is in those clearings, under that open sky, that the Centaurs make their home. They live in herds, moving without haste through the deeper glades, and they have lived there far longer than any wizard now walking the castle halls can remember. The forest is theirs in a way that no fence or charter could ever make it. They belong to it the way the rivers belong to it, the way the constellations belong to the dark between the leaves. A centaur is a being of two natures joined into one graceful whole. From the waist upward there is the body of a man or a woman, the chest and the arms and the thoughtful face, and below there is the powerful body of a horse. 4 hooves that can carry them at a gallop over root and stone without a stumble. It would be easy, seeing them at a distance, to think of them as a simple crossing of the two. But the centaurs would gently and firmly refuse such an idea. They are neither man nor horse, but a third thing entire, older than that comparison, and prouder. Their pride is not the loud and grasping kind. It is quiet, immense, rooted deep. It is the pride of a people who have watched 1,000 human lifetimes pass, and who have kept their own counsel through every one of them. For the centaurs are, above all else, watchers of the sky. Their great gift, the study to which they give their long lives, is the reading of the heavens. Astronomy and divination are woven together for them into a single art. They walk out into the open glades on clear nights, and they gaze upward, and in the slow wheeling of the planets and the burning of the far stars, they believe the shape of things to come is written. Where a human astronomer might chart a planet only to name it and measure it, a centaur reads that same slow light as a page of prophecy. The rising of Mars, burning red and bright above the treetops, tells them of change and of conflict long before it reaches the world of men. The passage of the outer planets, the quiet gathering and parting of the stars, all of it speaks to them in a language they have refined across uncounted generations. They are patient with that language. They do not rush to conclusions. A single sign may be studied for many years before its meaning is felt to be understood. For the centaurs measure time not in seasons, but in the turning of the whole sky. Because of this, the centaurs hold themselves apart from the hurried world. They are deeply wary of humankind, and their wariness is not cruelty, but caution, earned across long ages. They have seen wizards come into their forest with fire and iron, with cages and with careless spells, and they have learned to trust slowly and to forgive slowly. They keep to their glades. They let the humans keep to their castle. When their paths must cross, they cross with courtesy and distance, and the centaurs give little away of what they know. There is an old sorrow folded into their carefulness, a memory of promises broken, and they guard themselves against having their trust wounded again. Yet within that caution, there is no meanness. Toward the forest and its creatures they are gentle keepers, and toward the stars they are devoted students, and toward one another they are bound in a fierce and tender loyalty that holds each herd together like a single living thing. There is a curious matter of pride, that shows how far the Centaurs will go to keep themselves apart. Long ago, when the wizarding authorities set out to sort the magical world into its proper orders, they offered the Centaurs a place among the beings, a station of dignity that would have set them beside the other thinking, speaking peoples. And the Centaurs, after their fashion, considered the offer and turned it quietly aside. They chose instead to count it among the beasts. It was not because they thought themselves lowly, for no people ever thought more highly of their own worth. It was because certain other creatures had been placed among the beings, creatures the Centaurs found it beneath their dignity to share a category with. Rather than be listed in such company, they preferred to stand alone with the wild things they respected. In this we see the whole shape of the Centaur heart, its pride, its stubbornness, its refusal to be defined by a world it did not trust. They would sooner be called beasts on their own terms than beings on someone else's. Yet not every Centaur holds to the old distance in the same way, and the herd that dwells in the Hogwarts forest gives us the clearest window into their kind. Among them there is one whose name has crossed into the human story more than any other. He is Firenze, a Centaur of pale palomino coat and hair the color of the ash under a dying fire, and eyes of a strange blue depth. Firenze came to believe that the long silence between Centaurs and humankind had grown too heavy to be borne, that there were things the herds knew which ought to be shared before the sky turned darker still. And so he did a thing almost unheard of among his people. When the school sought a teacher of divination, Firenze accepted, and he walked out of the forest and into the castle to teach the children of wizards how to read the heavens as the Centaurs read them. It was a breaking, a stepping over the oldest line, and it did not go unanswered, for not all the herd saw wisdom in it. There is Bane, dark of coat and darker of temper, proud beyond even the pride of his kin, who looked on Firenze's choice as a betrayal of everything the Centaurs held sacred. To Bane, to serve humans, to let oneself be led into their castle and set to teaching their young, was to lower the whole race, to trade the wide and holy sky for the low ceilings of men. And there is Megorian, the grave and thoughtful leader of the herd, who carried the weight of the others' anger and the burden of deciding what should be done with one of their own who had wandered so far from the path. Between these three, the old questions of the Centaurs draw themselves out under the stars. How far may a proud people bend toward another without breaking? And what is owed to the world beyond the trees? And whether the future written in the heavens can ever truly be turned aside by the choices of one lone heart? These are the matters they carry as the constellations wheel above the glades, slow and patient and unresolved, while the herd moves on through the dark. So, we leave the Centaurs to their watching, their upturned faces silvered by the light of the forest stars, and we let sleep gather around us as it gathers around the glades. But the forbidden forest holds more than watchers of the sky. Deeper in, where the trees grow so close that no starlight reaches the ground at all, something else has made its home, something with many eyes and many legs. Waiting in a darkness the Centaurs never enter. Up next in Chapter 10, Acromantulas and the Colony in the Dark, we'll uncover how a single forbidden creature, hidden away by a frightened boy, grew into a whole nation of monstrous spiders sprawling through the heart of the wood. We leave the Centaurs where the trees grow thin and the sky opens above them, those watchful stargazers who read the future in the slow wheeling of the heavens and who guard the clearings of the forbidden forest with a pride that no wizard has ever truly touched. Their world is one of open ground and lifted eyes, of firelight and quiet argument beneath the moon. Yet the forest does not end where the Centaurs end. It deepens. It thickens. The paths grow narrower, and the canopy knits itself closed overhead until the starlight the Centaurs cherish can no longer reach the ground at all. And it is here, in the parts of the wood where the air hangs heavy and still, that we come at last to a stranger devotion and to a story that lives up to its name. Acromantulas and the colony in the dark. An acromantula is not an ordinary spider grown large. It is something else entirely. A creature of true size and true mind. A beast whose body can span the width of a small clearing and whose 8 black eyes hold a slow and knowing intelligence. Its legs are long and jointed and covered in coarse dark hair, and when it moves with a terrible grace, a patience that seems almost thoughtful. Across its great back the hair thins, and beneath it the body is pale and heavy. The pincers at its front are the most unsettling part of all, for when they open and close they make a soft clicking sound, and that clicking is not empty noise. It is the nearest thing the creature has to a voice, and from it, remarkably, comes speech. For the acromantula can talk, not in the way a parrot echoes a sound, but truly with meaning and memory, holding conversation and holding grudges, understanding much of what passes around it. Where such a creature first came from, no one can say with certainty. The old accounts place its home far to the east, in the deep green forests of Borneo, in warm and dripping jungle, where the trees rise like pillars and the undergrowth never sleeps. There, the acromantulas are said to have lived hidden from human eyes, weaving their vast webs between the towering trunks, keeping to the shadowed hollows that no traveler would willingly enter. Many who study magical creatures believe the species was not born of nature at all, but bred, coaxed into being by wizards long ago who wanted something monstrous and loyal to guard a treasure or a secret. Whatever the truth, the result was a beast that carried within it a hunger that no keeper could ever fully tame. For all its intelligence, for all its capacity for speech and thought, the acromantula is a carnivore to its core, and it does not trouble itself with the difference between the flesh of an animal and the flesh of a person. It is against this backdrop that we meet the most famous acromantula ever to have lived, and the gentle, unlikely bond that carried him from a small warm egg to the heart of a shadowed English wood. His name was Aragog, and long before he grew into the giant that others feared, he was little more than a curiosity held in the hands of a boy. That boy was Hagrid, young and enormous and soft of heart, a student at Hogwarts who loved every dangerous thing the world had ever made. Somewhere, from somewhere, an egg came into his keeping, and rather than fear what might hatch from it, Hagrid did what he always did. He cared for it. He kept it warm and hidden away, tucked in a quiet corner where no teacher would look, and he waited to see what would come. What came was Aragog, and from the very beginning, the two of them understood one another in a way that had nothing to do with size or shape or the number of legs a creature happened to have. To Hagrid, the small spider was not a monster in waiting, but a friend, a living secret to be protected and fed and spoken to in the low, warm voice he saved for the creatures no one else would love. And to Aragog, in turn, Hagrid was the first thing he had ever known, the great, gentle shape that brought food and safety and a steady kindness in a world that would soon offer him very little of either. That bond, formed so early and held so long, is the true heart of this tale, and it is a bond worth pausing over, for there is something tender in it that outlasts every fright the creature would later cause. The world, of course, was not kind to a boy who kept such a pet. When fear spread through the castle and blame went looking for a place to land, it landed on Hagrid. And it landed on the strange creature hidden in his care. Hagrid was sent away from his lessons, his wand broken, his good name stained by a crime he had not committed. Yet even in that ruin his first thought was not for himself. It was for Aragog. And so, rather than let the spider be destroyed, he carried him out into the one place vast enough and dark enough to hide him. The forbidden forest that pressed against the edges of the school grounds. There, deep among the oldest trees, in a hollow where the light never truly reached, Aragog was set free to live. He did not live alone for long. In time, Hagrid found him a mate, a female called Mosag, and from the two of them a colony began to grow. Season after season, year after year, the descendants of Aragog spread through that lightless heart of the wood until the hollow became a settlement, and the settlement became a domain, a place thick with silk and shadow and the soft, ceaseless clicking of countless pincers. This was the colony in the dark, a nation of great spiders hidden a stone's throw from a school full of children, ruled by a single ancient creature who remembered the hands that had first held him warm. And through all of it, across all those long years, Hagrid never abandoned his friend. He visited him. He brought him food when he could. He spoke to him as one old companion speaks to another, and Aragog, blind at last with age and grown vast beyond reckoning, knew his voice and welcomed him still. Yet, we must not let the sweetness of that friendship hide the shape of what the colony truly was. For Aragog's loyalty ran to Hagrid alone and to no other living soul. The devotion was real, but it was narrow. It did not extend to the rest of humankind, and it did not extend to the boys and girls who walked the grounds above. Within the deep wood, the spiders kept their own law, and that law was simple and old and merciless. Anything that wandered into their domain without Hagrid's protection was not a guest, but a meal. Aragog himself, for all his memory and his gratitude, made no secret of this. He honored the one who had raised him, and he let the forest know that the man was not to be harmed. But beyond that single mercy, he offered nothing. The hunger of his kind was the hunger of his kind, and not even the love of a lifetime could soften it into safety for anyone else. There is a strange and quiet lesson in that, the kind of thing worth turning over slowly as the mind begins to drift. Here was a creature capable of speech and thought, and something very close to friendship. And here was a man who saw past every fearsome thing about him to the gentle bond beneath. The two of them held that bond faithfully to the very end, across a lifetime of loneliness and hiding. And when at last the great spider's long life came to its close, it was Hagrid who mourned him, and Hagrid who laid him to rest in the grounds he had guarded so long. Devotion and danger, tenderness and dread, all of it woven together in the dark like silk across the trees. And so we leave the colony to its quiet, and turn from the creatures of 8 legs and endless webs toward beings built on a far greater scale, the towering, heavy-footed kin who dwell in high and lonely places where the wind is thin and cold. Up next, in Chapter 11, Trolls, Giants, and the Mountain Kin, we'll uncover how the largest and least understood of all magical peoples came to walk the earth, why the wizarding world learned to fear their strength, and what tenderness, if any, might be found in hearts so vast and so misjudged. We leave the Acromantulas resting in the deep hush of their forest hollow, their many eyes dimming as the canopy settles into stillness, and we let our thoughts drift upward and outward, away from the low tangle of webs, toward the high and lonely places of the world. For not every large creature in this old story hides beneath the trees. Some walk in the open, on legs like tree trunks, across cold slopes where the wind never quite stops moving. And so, quietly, we turn to a tale of the tall and the heavy and the slow of heart. This is the story we might call Trolls, Giants, and the Mountain Kin. We begin with the trolls, and we picture them first as they truly are, for there is little use in dressing them up. A troll is enormous, standing perhaps 12 feet tall and weighing something close to a ton. Its skin is a dull, stony gray, thick and pebbled, as if the creature had been carved from the very mountain and then, half finished, sent lumbering off to fend for itself. Its head sits small and round upon those vast shoulders, and inside that head there lives a mind so dim and so slow that the troll can barely be said to think at all. It knows hunger, and it knows anger, and it knows the pleasure of swinging something heavy. Beyond that, the world is mostly a blur of shapes it might strike. We watch these creatures move, and we notice how they carry great wooden clubs, dragging them along the ground as a child might drag a stick far too large for its arm. They are violent by nature, not out of cruelty exactly, for cruelty needs a cleverness they do not possess, but out of a plain and dull instinct to smash whatever comes near. They speak, when they speak at all, in a few grunted sounds, and most of what passes between trolls is closer to gesture than to language. And yet, for all their brute simplicity, there is something almost sorrowful in them, a hint of loneliness in their wandering, as though they were the leftover rough drafts of a gentler design. We find, as we look closer, that trolls come in several kinds, each shaped by the country it haunts. The mountain troll is the largest and the most fearsome, pale gray and bald, prowling the high stony wastes. The forest troll is a little smaller, its skin a greenish gray, and it moves among the trees with a mossy sort of stealth, some of them growing a thin covering of hair, the color of the woods. And there is the river troll, purplish and squat, with short horns upon its brow, lurking near the water, and under old stone bridges where the current runs cold and dark. 3 varieties, then, 3 shades of the same slow, heavy life, and each keeping to the wild and forgotten edges of the map. We remember now a night when one of these creatures came indoors, into a place it never should have been. On a certain Halloween, long before our own tale settles, a mountain troll was loosed inside the great castle of Hogwarts, and it blundered through the lower passages with its club scraping the flagstones. The students had gathered for their feast, warm and unaware, when word came that the beast was somewhere below. In the end, 2 young friends, cornered with the troll in a shadowed washroom, found the courage and the luck to bring it down. And the great gray shape crumpled to the floor, stunned rather than slain. It is a memory told often at that school, the night the mountain troll came calling, and it reminds us how thin the wall can be between the wild world and the lamplit one. We let the trolls fade back into their slopes now, and we climb higher still, into the story of the giants, for they too belong to the mountain kin, though they are older and prouder and far more tragic. Once, we are told, giants roamed across many lands, tall as houses, strong beyond any reckoning. But theirs is a dying race, driven year by year into the most remote and barren ranges, hidden valleys where no wizard cared to follow. Their numbers dwindled, their old grounds shrank. Where there had been hundreds, there came to be scores, and where there had been scores, only a scattered handful clinging to the cold. We consider their way of life, and we find it brutal in its plainness. Giants live in loose tribes, and each tribe answers to a single chieftain, whom they call the Gurg. The Gurg takes the best of everything, the warmest sleeping place, the largest share of food, and he holds his rank only so long as he is strong enough to keep it. When a Gurg grows old or weak, another rises to challenge him, and the leadership passes in a hard and bloody fashion. It is a grim custom, and yet we can look upon it with quiet understanding. For these are creatures pressed to the very margin of survival, and their fierceness is the fierceness of a people running out of world to live in. Slowly, over the long years, they drew closer to their own vanishing, until the very word giant came to carry the weight of something nearly gone. We turn now, with a softer heart, to those who stand between the two worlds, the half-giants, born of one giant parent and one human. And here the story warms, for it gives us Rubeus Hagrid, the keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts, a man of tremendous size and even greater gentleness. His mother had been a giantess, and from her he took his height and his strength, but his spirit belonged entirely to kindness. We watch him tend to wounded creatures that others would fear, cradling the fragile and the dangerous alike in those enormous hands, and we understand that being partly of the giants did not make him hard. It made him, if anything, more tender toward every living thing that the world had cast to its edges. We meet another of this rare kin in Madame Olympe Maxime, the headmistress of a great school far across the water, a woman of grand and towering stature who carried herself with elegance and pride. She was slow to speak of her giant blood, guarding it closely, for the world had taught her that such heritage was better hidden than shown. And yet in her, as in Hagrid, we see that the giant strain need not mean savagery. It could mean dignity and depth and a quiet resolve that steadied all around her. We come at last to Grop, and here the tale grows most tender of all. Grop was Hagrid's half-brother, a true giant though small by the measure of his own kind, standing only some 16 feet, where others of his blood rose far higher. Hagrid found him alone and unwanted among the mountain tribes, and rather than leave him to that harsh world, he brought his brother home through long and secret miles, hiding him in the forest near the school. At first Grop understood almost nothing, swinging and stamping in confusion, as bewildered as a lost child in a body of terrible size. But patiently, day upon day, Hagrid sat with him and spoke to him and taught him. And slowly the great creature began to learn a few gentle words, to recognize a friendly face, to reach out rather than to strike. We watch that bond deepen, the enormous half-brothers keeping their strange and loyal company at the forest's edge, and we feel how love can soften even the roughest of the mountain kin. So we let the giants and their half-giant children settle now into the quiet of the hills, the trolls dozing in their stony hollows, Grop curled somewhere among the dark trees with his brother watching over him. The tall and the heavy have their peace at last. But beneath the mountains, far below where trolls tread and giants once ruled, there lives another folk entirely, small and sharp-eyed, and clever beyond measure, keepers of gold and secrets, and an ancient, jealous craft. Up next in Chapter 12, Goblins and the Craft of the Deep, we'll uncover how these cunning smiths of the underworld shaped treasures of impossible beauty, and why their notions of who may truly own a thing set them so long at odds with the world above. We have spent our last quiet hours among the largest of the magical creatures, the trolls who lumber through cold mountain passes, and the giants who once ruled whole valleys before the world grew too small for them. Those were beings of great size and small want, of hunger and slow thought, and we left them where the snow gathers on high ridges and the wind moves like a long breath through the stones. Now the mountains sink away behind us, and the land itself seems to fold inward and downward, drawing us away from open sky and toward a warmer, older kind of darkness. For if the giants belong to the heights, then there is another people who belong entirely to the deep. And to reach them, we must go beneath the streets of a city, beneath the roots of buildings, beneath even the memory of daylight, into the long tunnels where lantern light glimmers on polished stone. This brings us at last to Goblins and the Craft of the Deep. Goblins are a highly intelligent race, and it is worth pausing on that word, for wizardkind has too often failed to grant it. They are not creatures in the way that trolls are creatures, blundering and dim. They are beings, thinking and reasoning and remembering, with a civilization far older in some respects than the one that hums above them. They are small in stature, with long, clever fingers and dark, quick eyes, and they carry themselves with the settled confidence of a people who know exactly what they are worth. Where wizards measure their power in spells and wands, goblins measure theirs in metal and in memory, in the slow, patient labor of the forge and the ledger. They speak their own tongue, called gobbledygook, a language of sharp sounds seldom learned by outsiders, and they keep their own counsel and their own laws in ways that have puzzled the wizarding world for many centuries. Their great work above all others is Gringotts, the Wizarding Bank, which stands in a tall, crooked building on Diagon Alley, but truly lives far below it. To step into Gringotts is to step onto the threshold of the goblin world. The marble hall at the top is only a doorway. The real bank descends for what feels like miles into the rock beneath London, a vast honeycomb of vaults and passages carved out over generations. Down there, the goblins run everything. They weigh the gold and count the coins, they guard the fortunes of the oldest wizarding families, and they carry their customers down through the dark on small rattling carts that plunge along narrow tracks past underground lakes and waterfalls. No wizard has ever fully mapped those depths. The goblins prefer it that way, and the deeper you travel, the older and stranger the security becomes, until the carts pass places where the air itself seems to hold its breath. To understand the goblins truly, we must understand how differently they think about ownership, for this single idea sits at the heart of nearly every quarrel they have ever had with wizardkind. When a goblin smith forges a sword or a crown or a fine silver goblet, the goblin does not believe that selling it hands over the object forever. In goblin law and goblin feeling, the maker remains the true owner of what the maker has made. The buyer holds it only for a lifetime, a tenant rather than a master, and when that buyer dies, the treasure ought to return to the hands that shaped it. Wizards, of course, see the matter entirely the other way. To a wizard, a thing bought and paid for is a thing owned, to be kept and passed down through children and grandchildren for as long as the family endures. Two peoples, then, looking at the same shining object and seeing two wholly different truths. It is a quiet disagreement, but a deep one, and from such quiet things whole histories of trouble have grown. The goblins are master metalworkers and silversmiths, and here their genius shows plainly. Goblin silver is unlike any other. It is said to take in only that which strengthens it, repelling common grime and drinking in things that make it finer still. A blade forged by goblins does not dull and does not rust, and it may grow more deadly with each danger it survives. Their crowns and cups and armor pass into legend, treasured by kings and wizards who could never have made such wonders themselves. Yet every one of those treasures carries the old shadow with it, the unspoken question of who it truly belongs to. And so the beauty of goblin craft and the bitterness of goblin grievance have always traveled together, bound in the same bright metal. That grievance runs through long stretches of history that wizards remember as the Goblin Rebellions. There were many of them across the centuries, uprisings and revolts and bloody skirmishes, and the wizarding world learned the names and dates of these conflicts as schoolroom lessons, dry and half forgotten. Yet each one had its root in something real, in tax and treasure, in broken promises and denied respect, in the refusal of one people to see another as its equal. We need not dwell on the violence, for at this hour it is enough to know that the peace between goblins and wizards has never been an easy or a settled thing. It is a truce made of caution, held in place by the fact that each side needs the other, the wizards for their gold and the goblins for their place in the world above. Beneath the courtesy of the marble hall there has always lain a longer memory of hurt, patient and unforgetting, the way deep water remembers cold. Among the goblins, some names drift up out of the dark and into wizarding stories. There is Griphook, a goblin who worked at Gringotts and who came to play a quiet part in great events, guiding others through the bank he knew so well, and carrying in his heart the whole weight of goblin belief about what is owned and by whom. In Griphook, we see the goblin character distilled, shrewd and proud, loyal to his own kind above all, moved less by the quarrels of wizards than by the ancient question of the maker and the made. He is a reminder that behind the counters of Gringotts stand individuals, each with a long inheritance of thought and grievance and skill, each measuring the tall visitors above them with a careful and knowing eye. And now we come to the deepest place of all, for a bank so old and so proud does not trust its greatest treasures to locks alone. Far down, past the highest security vaults, where the tracks run out and the stone grows ancient, the goblins keep a guardian that few living things have ever seen and lived to describe. It is a dragon, pale and half-blind from its long life without sun. Its scales grown colorless in the endless dark, its wings cramped by the low ceilings of its prison. The creature is kept in fear rather than comfort, trained over many years to dread certain sounds, so that it cowers and recoils when it ought to rage. There it waits in the black air before the oldest vaults, breathing slow fire into the silence, a living lock upon the wealth of centuries. Even the goblins tread carefully near it, and the wizards who own the treasures beyond it seldom think, as they sleep soundly in their beds far above, of the vast, tormented thing that keeps their fortunes safe in the dark. So we leave the goblins to their forges and their ledgers, to their carts rattling down through the deep and their long, unforgotten grievances. A proud and clever people who have shaped much of the wizarding world without ever quite belonging to it. Yet they are not the only ones whose fate is bound up with the great houses of wizardkind, whose labor holds those houses together while their own place remains uncertain and unequal. There is another people, smaller still and far gentler, whose devotion runs so deep that it can look like something stranger and sadder than loyalty. Up next in Chapter 13, House-Elves and the Bond of Service will uncover how a race of tender and powerful beings came to give themselves so completely to the families they serve, and what that quiet, unbreakable bond has cost them across the long years. We have spent our last hours in the deep places, in the tunnels and vaults where the goblins keep their gold and guard their oldest grudges, and we have watched how a proud people can measure the whole of the world in ownership and craft. But not every magical being holds so tightly to what it makes, and not every creature counts its worth in coin. Some measure their lives entirely by service, by the warmth of a household they will never own, by a devotion so complete that it becomes the shape of who they are. So we leave the cold echo of the mines behind us, and we climb back toward the light, and we come now to a gentler kind of magic, and to a story that has always been about house-elves and the bond of service. Picture, first, one of these small beings. They stand no higher than a young child, with thin limbs and knobbled fingers, and heads that seem a little too large for their slender bodies. Their eyes are enormous and round and full of feeling, the color of tennis balls or of very old amber, and their ears are wide and bat-like, quick to flatten when they are afraid, and to lift when they are pleased. They wear no proper clothes, only pillowcases and tea towels and scraps of cloth pressed into service as garments. And this is not a matter of poverty alone, but of something far older and stranger, as we shall soon come to understand. When they move without sound, appearing and vanishing with a small crack of air, for they carry a magic that is quiet and enormous at once. That is the thing we must hold on to as we settle into this chapter. A house elf is not weak. The magic that lives in these gentle creatures is a deep and startling power, a power that can shatter stone and turn a grown wizard head over heels, a power that moves faster than most spells a witch could raise. They can appear inside places that no ordinary magic could reach, slipping past wards and walls that would hold a human sorcerer at bay. And yet, all of that strength is folded inward, given over freely, poured out in the service of the families they are bound to. It is one of the tender riddles of the wizarding world that so much force should choose to spend itself on the cooking of dinners and the polishing of silver and the raising of other people's children. For house elves are bound, and the bond is the heart of their whole existence. They belong to wizarding families and to the great old houses those families keep, passed down from one generation to the next like the portraits on the walls, serving the same bloodline for hundreds of years. The bond is woven of magic, and it holds them close, and within it they find a strange and total sense of purpose. To serve a good family well is, for such a creature, the nearest thing to joy. To be praised, to be needed, to keep a household running from before dawn until long after the last candle is snuffed. This is the life they know, and, in most cases, the only life they would ever choose. But the same bond carries a shadow, and it is a hard thing to look at, so we will look at it softly. A house elf who disobeys its family, who speaks against them, who even thinks a disloyal thought, feels compelled to punish itself for the offense. It might shut its own fingers in an oven door, or strike itself, or beat its head against the wall, driven by a compulsion sewn into the magic of its servitude. It is not that their masters always demand this. The impulse lives inside the elves themselves, a kind of conscience turned painfully sharp, so tangled up with loyalty that the two can no longer be pulled apart. And there is only one way for such a creature to be set free from all of it. A house elf gains its freedom when its master presents it with a gift of clothes, a sock, a hat, a single garment placed into its hands, and the bond dissolves, and the elf is its own being at last. Now we come to the one whose freedom we remember best. There was an elf named Dobby who served a cruel and ancient family, and who lived for years in fear of the very household he was bound to. Yet inside him burned a courage far larger than his small frame. And when he came to know a certain young wizard named Harry, that courage found its purpose. Dobby tried again and again to protect the boy, even when protecting him meant defying the masters he served, even when every act of loyalty to Harry cost him a wave of that terrible self-punishment. And then came the moment we cherish, when Harry tricked Dobby's master into handing the elf a sock, and the bond fell away, and Dobby stood free for the first time in his life. From that day on, he was fiercely, gladly loyal to Harry. Not because any magic compelled him, but because he had chosen it with his whole liberated heart. Not every story ends in such brightness, and there is one that asks us to hold it tenderly. There was an elf called Winky, devoted for all her days to a proud old family, who through no true fault of her own was cast out and given clothes she never wanted. For Winky, freedom was not a gift, but a grief. She had loved her service, had folded her entire self into it, and without it, she was lost. We watch her mourn what she has lost, quiet and broken, unable to see herself as anything but a servant who has failed. Her sorrow reminds us that the bond, for all its cruelty, was also the whole meaning of her world, and that to a creature made of devotion, being cut loose can feel like being unmade. And there is Creature, the ancient elf of the House of Black, who for long years was bitter and muttering and half mad with old loyalties, serving the memory of a family that had mostly died away. He seemed, at first, a spiteful thing, clinging to the prejudices of the dark house he had always kept. Yet even Creature carried a wound, a private grief for a young master he had once loved and been unable to save. When at last he was met with kindness rather than scorn, when he was treated as something more than a burden, the old elf changed. His redemption came slowly, and it came sweetly, and by the end he polished the silver with pride again, and cooked with love, and he led the elves of the household into battle for the people who had finally shown him tenderness. Nor should we forget the many nameless workers who keep the great school running. Deep beneath Hogwarts, in a vast warm kitchen that hums with steam and firelight, more than 100 house-elves labor through every day and every night. They cook the feasts that appear as if by magic on the long tables above. They wash and mend and tend the endless quiet work of the castle, and they do it gladly, asking for nothing, proud to serve a place so full of life. To visit them is to step into a pocket of ceaseless, contented industry, small figures bustling in the glow, happy in the only way they know. There was one young witch, Hermione, who could not look at all of this without her conscience stirring. She saw the labor and the binding and the lack of any wage or thanks, and she could not accept that devotion should excuse a life of servitude. So she began a campaign for their welfare, knitting hats to free them, arguing for their rights, insisting that even the happiest servant deserves a choice. Many of the elves did not thank her, and many did not want the freedom she offered, and her crusade was often lonely and often misunderstood. But there was a rare and stubborn compassion in it, a refusal to let anyone, however small, go unseen. So we leave the house-elves in their warm kitchens and their long, loyal watches, these tender beings whose greatest power is the love they choose to give. From the hearthlight and the pillowcases, we turn now toward colder, wetter places, down to the reeds and the black pools where far less gentle creatures wait. Up next in Chapter 14, Grindylows, Kappas, and the creatures of dark water will uncover the pale drowned things that lurk beneath the surface, and learn why the still waters of the wizarding world are the ones you should fear the most. We have spent our last quiet hours among the house-elves, those small and faithful figures who move through the corridors of Hogwarts unseen, who tend the fires and fold the linens and ask for nothing in return but the chance to be useful. There is a tenderness in the way they slip through the castle, keeping to the shadows, carrying warmth from room to room. And as we let them fade softly back into the walls they love, our thoughts drift downward, past the stone foundations, past the deep cellars where the elves keep their kitchens, and out toward the wide black water that sleeps at the foot of the school. For not every creature the young witches and wizards learn about is gentle. Some of them dwell in cold and weedy depths, and it is there that we now turn into this chapter: Grindylows, Kappas, and the creatures of dark water. The lake that lies below Hogwarts is very old and very deep, and it holds far more than clear water and drifting reflections of the towers above. Beneath its calm surface there is a whole hidden country, silted and green, laced with forests of weed that sway in the slow currents. It is a place of muffled light and long silence, and the students who study defense against the dark arts come to know it, not by swimming through it, but by learning about the small dark beings that make their homes there. Their teacher in this, in the year we remember most fondly, was a quiet and shabby man named Remus Lupin, a professor who had a rare gift for making even the strangest creatures feel like something a person could understand rather than fear. Of all the water demons Lupin brought before his classes, the first and most common was the Grindylow. Picture a creature no larger than a child, its skin a sickly and mottled green, the color of old pondweed and standing water. It has two small, sharp horns upon its head, and a face that is more clever than kind. But it is the hands that matter most, for the Grindylow has very long fingers, and though those fingers look strong, they are in truth thin and brittle, like green twigs left too long in the cold. The Grindylow lurks among the weeds of dark lakes and stagnant pools, waiting in the murk. When something warm passes near, a wading foot, a swimmer's ankle, a hand trailing in the shallows, the Grindylow reaches out and seizes hold, wrapping those long fingers tight and trying to drag its prey down into the deep. Lupin taught his students that the Grindylow, for all its grip and all its menace, has a weakness that turns its own strength against it. Those long fingers, so quick to fasten on, are fragile. A firm and sudden grasp, a decisive snap, and the fingers break, and the grip is loosed, and the creature recoils back into the weeds to nurse its brittle hands. There is something almost reassuring in this lesson. The knowledge that even a thing which hides in darkness and hunts by surprise can be answered with a single calm and well-placed motion. The students learned not to thrash, not to panic, but to reach for the fingers themselves and break the hold. And so the Grindylow, though it belongs to the syllabus of dark creatures, becomes in the telling a puzzle rather than a nightmare, a knot that can be undone by a steady hand. From the weedy shallows of British lakes, Lupin's lessons carried his students far across the world, to the still ponds and slow rivers of Japan, where another water demon makes its home. This is the Kappa, a scaly creature that looks in some ways like a monkey and in others like a frog. Its skin covered not in fur, but in fish, like scales that shine dully green and brown in the water. The Kappa is a haunter of quiet places, of temple ponds and reed-choked river bends, and it too has a taste for dragging the unwary beneath the surface. In its own homeland, it is said to prefer the blood of those who venture too near, though the young students of Hogwarts learned of it chiefly as a creature to be understood and outwitted rather than fought. For the Kappa hides its power and its weakness in the strangest of places. Upon the top of its head there is a shallow hollow, a small basin like a dish set into the skull, and that hollow is filled with water. This water is the source of all the Kappa's strength. So long as the hollow stays brimming, the creature is strong and swift and dangerous in its own pond. But the Kappa is bound by a curious rule of courtesy, for it is a creature that cannot help but return a bow. Lupin taught that a clever witch or wizard, meeting a Kappa, need only bow low before it, and the Kappa, unable to resist, will bow deeply in return. And when it bows, the water spills from the hollow in its head, and with the water goes its strength, and the creature is left weak and harmless upon the bank. There is a gentleness to this piece of lore that is easy to love. The idea that a monster can be undone not by violence, but by a courteous inclination of the head, that good manners themselves become a kind of quiet magic. Between these two, the Grindylow and the Kappa, Lupin drew the shape of a whole family of dark water beings, creatures that share a love of murky depths and a habit of reaching upward toward the light and warmth of the surface. He spoke of the Merpeople too, though those are a nobler folk than the demons of the shallows, dwelling in their own villages far down in the coldest reaches of the lake. And he was careful, always, to remind his students that not everything in dark water means them harm. For every Grindylow tangled in the weeds, there are gentler things drifting in the same slow currents, and it would be a mistake to fear the whole lake for the sake of a few of its hidden residents. Among the kindliest of these is the Plimpy, a small and rather comical fish-like creature, round of body and spotted, that paddles through deep lakes on its two long rubbery legs, each ending in a webbed foot. The plimpy is harmless, more of a nuisance than a threat, nibbling here and there at the roots and snails of the lake bed. And the merpeople who share its waters are said to find it a bother and to tie its flexible legs into knots to send it drifting harmlessly away. There is a quiet comedy in the thought of it, this daft and gentle creature bobbing off with its legs neatly tangled, and it stands as a small reminder that the deep is not only a place of teeth and shadows. Other soft and simple beings share those waters as well, the Grindylows and Kappas, making their homes alongside creatures that trouble no one, so that the lake becomes not a single dark thing, but a layered world of many kinds of life, some dangerous, some merely strange, and a great many altogether harmless. And this, perhaps, is the truest lesson of Lupin's watery classes. He taught his students the shapes and habits of the creatures of dark water, not to make them afraid of the lake, but to make them wise about it, to give them the calm and steady knowledge that turns a monster into a manageable thing. A Grindylow is only a grip that can be broken. A Kappa is only a strength that can be poured away with a bow. Even the coldest and weediest depths hold their patterns and their weaknesses, and a mind that stays serene can find them. So the dark water loses its terror and becomes, in the end, simply another part of the world to be learned, slow and green and quiet beneath the surface. But not all the magical creatures the students met belonged to the shadowed places of the world. Some walked instead in the deep green heart of the forbidden forest, where the light fell soft between the trees and the rarest of beasts moved on silver hooves. Up next in Chapter 15, Unicorns and the Purest Magic in the Forest, we'll uncover how these shining creatures came to be seen as the very emblem of innocence, why their blood was both a blessing and a curse, and what it meant to meet one in the hush of the trees. We drift now away from the dark water, away from the cold weight of the lake and the pale hands that move beneath its surface, and we let the current of our thoughts carry us up onto the shore, up through the reeds, up into the soft green shade of the trees. Where the deep water asked us to hold our breath, the forest asks us only to slow it. The creatures we leave behind lived in shadow and silence, in the black hush of things that never see the sun. The one we come to now lives in light, or seems to carry its own light with it, and so we cross gently from one world to the other, from the drowned dark into the quiet glow of the trees. This is the chapter we call Unicorns and the Purest Magic in the Forest, and it is a slow one, a tender one, a story to breathe out into. The Forbidden Forest is not one place, but many. It is oak and pine and silver birch. It is bracken and moss and the slow drip of water from high leaves, and in its deepest hollows, far from the castle, far from any path a student is meant to walk, there lives the most beautiful creature in all of that wild country. The unicorn is a horse, or shaped like one, but no ordinary horse ever gleamed the way this one does. Its coat is a white so pure it seems almost to shine of its own accord, a white like fresh snow under a clean moon, a white that holds no gray and no gold in it at all. From its brow rises a single long horn, straight and spiraled and sharp as truth, and its eyes are large and dark and endlessly calm. To see one standing still among the trees is to feel the whole forest grow quiet around it, as if every leaf were holding its breath in respect. But the unicorn is not born white. This is one of the gentlest facts in all the lore, and it is worth resting on. A newborn unicorn, a foal, comes into the world the color of pure gold. Imagine that small thing standing on new legs in a clearing, wet and unsteady, golden from nose to tail, glowing like a coin left in the sun. For the first years of its life, it keeps that warm color, and then slowly, as it grows, the gold begins to cool and fade. By about the age of 2, it has turned to silver, a soft gray shine like moonlight on water, and its horn has begun to lengthen and curl. Only when it comes fully into its growth, only when it reaches its 7th year, does the silver give way at last to the flawless white of the adult. Gold, then silver, then white. A whole life spelled out in 3 quiet colors, each one lovelier than the last. There is a shyness in these creatures that makes them very hard to find. Grown unicorns keep far from people, deep in the untouched heart of the forest, and they will not easily let a human near. Yet they are not without trust. It is said, and it is true, that a unicorn will sooner allow the touch of a gentle hand than a rough one, and that it favors the approach of a witch over a wizard. The young in particular, the golden foals and the silver colts, are more willing to come close, more curious, more open to a soft voice and a still figure, waiting patiently among the trees. There is something in that image worth carrying down into sleep, the idea that the purest and most magical thing in the whole forest is also the most gentle, and that it comes not to strength, but to tenderness, not to the one who chases, but to the one who waits quietly with an open hand. Everything about the unicorn is woven through with deep magic, and every part of it holds power. The long spiral horn is one of the most valued things a witch or wizard can own, for it can be ground and mixed into medicines and potions of great strength, and it is said to cure and to protect and to purify. The tail hairs and mane hairs, fine and silver and strong, are prized as well, and among their many uses is one of the noblest of all. For a single unicorn hair lies at the core of some of the finest wands ever made, a soft, steady magic that stays faithful to its owner and rarely turns to darker work. Even the creature's blood carries magic, silver and bright, a blood that shines like molten moonlight when it is spilled. To drink it will keep a person alive, even if that person is an inch from death, even if nothing else in the world could hold back the end. And here the story turns, though we will keep the turning slow and soft, for this is not a tale to frighten anyone towards sleep. There is a price on that shining blood, a price so heavy that no ordinary soul would ever pay it. To slay a unicorn, to take that innocent and defenseless life for the sake of the blood within it, is to commit a wrong so deep that the act stains the one who does it forever. The blood will save you, yes, but from the very moment it touches your lips, you will live only a half-life, a cursed life, a broken and shadowed existence bought with the death of something wholly pure. It is a terrible bargain, and it is meant to be. The lore is clear and quiet on this point. Only a person already lost, already desperate beyond all reason, would ever raise a hand against a unicorn. For to harm the purest magic in the forest is to lose your own place in the world of the living. There is a night woven into all of this that many will remember. A night deep in the trees during a certain boy's very first year at the school. Sent into the forest in the dark as a punishment, that young boy came upon a clearing and found there a unicorn lying on the ground, its white coat dulled, its side wounded, its silver blood spilled bright across the fallen leaves. Something hooded and hungry had brought it down and was crouched over it, drinking. The sight was a sorrowful one. The loveliest creature in the world laid low in the dark, and yet, even wounded, the unicorn held its strange grace, its whiteness glowing faintly against the black earth like the last of a candle. The boy was saved that night by another of the forest's guardians, one of the swift horse-bodied watchers who carry the sky in their memory, but it is the fallen unicorn itself that stays with us, luminous and still, a reminder of how bright a thing can be even as its light grows dim. So let us leave the unicorn there, not in its sorrow, but in its wholeness. Let us hold instead the picture of one alive and well, deep in a hidden glade, white as new snow. Its horn catching a thread of moonlight, its dark eyes calm, a golden foal at its side taking its first uncertain steps. Around it, the forest keeps its hush. Nothing frightens it here. It is the purest magic the trees have ever grown, sacred and serene and utterly at peace, and the whole of the wild country seems to soften in its presence. Breathe out with the forest. Let the light of it settle over you like a blanket of quiet snow. Yet the forest and the world beyond it hold darker shapes as well. Shapes that do not glow, but drink the glow from everything near them. Shapes born not of purity, but of fear itself. Up next, in Chapter 16, Dementors, Boggarts, and the Beings of Fear, we'll uncover how the coldest guardians of the wizarding world came to feed on happiness, how a creature can wear the face of your deepest dread, and how even in the presence of such things there remains a warmth that fear can never quite put out. We leave the moonlit glade where the unicorns wandered, that place of silver hooves and gentle light, and we carry a little of its calm with us as we step toward the shadowed edges of the magical world. For where there is the purest of beings, there are also, in the old lore, the darkest, and the two are not so far apart as they seem. The unicorn taught us that magic can be tender beyond measure. Now, wrapped in that same softness, we can look without fear upon the things that dwell in the cold corners of the story, because to understand them is already to loosen their hold. This chapter is about Dementors, Boggarts, and the Beings of Fear, and though those names may sound heavy, we approach them slowly, the way one might approach a locked door, and find, upon looking closely, that the key has been in our hand all along. Consider first the Dementors, the tall, hooded shapes that glide rather than walk, drifting a few inches above the ground as though the earth itself would rather not touch them. In the lore, they are not truly beasts and not truly spirits, but something in between, counted among the beings of dread, wrapped always in dark cloaks that hide whatever they are beneath. Their hands, when they show them, are gray and glistening, and scabbed, like something that has been too long underwater, and they draw a rattling breath as they come near. What the Dementor feeds upon is not flesh at all. It feeds upon feeling, upon warmth, upon every happy memory a person carries. Where a Dementor drifts, the air grows chill, and the sunlight seems to thin, and a person feels that they may never be cheerful again, as though joy itself has been quietly drained from the room. There is a deeper power that these creatures hold, spoken of in hushed tones, called the kiss. When a Dementor lowers its hood and presses close, it is said to draw out the very soul of a person, leaving the body alive but empty, a house with no one home. It is the most feared thing about them, and yet, even here, held in the calm of our quiet telling, it becomes less a horror and more a kind of sad, cold fact of that world, one that the wise learned to guard against. For long years these hooded figures served as the guards of Azkaban, the wizard prison set upon a small island far out in the northern sea. There they circled the stone walls, and the prisoners within lived among their own worst memories, day after gray day. The Dementors kept the prison without keys or bars, because no captive wished to walk out into that draining cold. It was a bleak arrangement, and later, the wiser heads of that world came to see it as a cruelty and turned away from it. Yet the lore does not leave us without light, and this is the part worth holding as we drift. Against the Dementor, there is one defense, and it is made not of iron, but of happiness. It is called the Patronus charm. To cast it, a witch or wizard must reach inward and find a single memory of pure joy, the brightest and warmest they possess, and hold it steady in the mind. From that memory pours a form of silver light, sometimes shapeless like mist, sometimes taking the shape of an animal. A stag, a hare, an otter, a phoenix, glowing and alive. This bright guardian stands between the person and the cold, and the Dementors cannot pass it, for they cannot bear the very thing they hunger for. There is something tender in that idea, that the answer to overwhelming despair is simply to remember one true moment of being happy, and to let it grow large enough to fill the dark. We can carry that with us into sleep, the notion that a small kept light is enough. Softly now we turn from the hooded ones to a gentler kind of fear, the Boggart. Where the Dementor is grim and vast, the Boggart is almost shy. No one has ever truly seen its own shape, because a Boggart is a shapeshifter that hides in dark, closed places, in the space beneath a bed, in an old wardrobe, in the hollow of a grandfather clock, waiting when someone opens the door. The Boggart looks into their mind and becomes the very thing that person fears the most. For one, it might take the form of a great spider, for another a cold serpent, for another a towering figure, or a full moon, or the deep water. It is fear itself given a borrowed shape, and it has no true face of its own, only the reflection of whatever heart stands before it. And here the old lore hands us its kindest lesson, for the Boggart is defeated not by strength and not by any weapon, but by laughter. The charm used against it is called ridiculous, and to cast it the witch or wizard must picture their fear turned suddenly absurd. The great spider is imagined on roller skates, sliding and toppling. The looming figure is dressed in a ridiculous hat and mismatched clothes. The moment the shape becomes funny instead of frightening, its power thins, and if enough people laugh at once, the Boggart cannot hold any form at all and simply comes apart. It is one of the softest and most reassuring ideas in that whole world, that a thing which grows only from our fear can be unmade the instant we choose to smile at it. Fear, the lore seems to say, is real, but it is also a shape we can rewrite. Before we let these thoughts settle, we give a gentle mention to one last shadow, the Lethifald, spoken of only rarely and in far warmer places than Britain. It is described in the lore as a thing like a black cloak, no thicker than a layer of cloth, that drifts low across the ground in tropical nights and folds itself silently over the sleeping. It is a rare creature, and most people go their whole lives without ever meeting one, and it too can be turned away by that same bright Patronus light. We name it here only in passing, the way one notes a distant cloud without letting it darken the whole sky, and then we let it drift on and away, back into the far southern dark where it belongs. What draws these beings together, the hooded Dementor, the hiding Boggart, the faint Lethifald, is that each of them is, in the end, a creature of fear, and each one teaches the same quiet thing. Fear in that world is not a wall, but a mist. The Dementor's cold is answered by a remembered joy. The Boggart's terror is answered by a laugh. Even the darkest shape can be faced, and once faced, it loosens, and once it loosens, it begins to dissolve. The way a bad dream loses its grip the moment we half wake and understand that it was only ever a dream. We do not deny that the dark exists in the lore. We simply learn, as the young witches and wizards learned, that it can be met, and that meeting it is the first step toward watching it fade. There is nothing here to keep us awake. There is only the deep reassurance that whatever frightens us can be looked at gently, and gently let go. So we breathe out the last of the cold and feel the warmth returning, the silver light of the Patronus glowing softly at the edge of the mind, standing watch while we rest. The beings of fear grow small and quiet behind us, and ahead the path turns green again, back toward creatures who mean no harm at all, small and curious and full of mischief. Up next in Chapter 17, Nifflers, Bowtruckles, and Newt's gentle beasts will uncover how a kind and wandering magizoologist filled a single worn suitcase with the most endearing creatures in all the wizarding world. From a treasure-loving little digger with a fondness for anything that shines, to the tiny guardians of the wand trees, and will drift among them as they settle, at last, into sleep. For a little while now, we have lingered in the colder corners of the wizarding world, among the Dementors that drift like gray smoke over still water, and the Boggarts that hide in old wardrobes, borrowing the shape of whatever a frightened mind imagines. Those were the shadows, and shadows have their place in every story worth telling. Yet even the deepest night softens toward morning, and the magical world is far more crowded with wonder than with dread. So let us leave the damp and the dark behind us, and let us turn instead, slowly and warmly, toward the small and the shining, the shy and the strange. Let us settle now into the gentle company of Nifflers, Bowtruckles, and Newt's gentle beasts, where nothing waits to frighten us, and every creature seems half made of kindness. Many of these little beings are known to us at all only because one patient man chose to know them. His name was Newt Scamander, a magizoologist who wandered the world with a battered leather case that held far more inside than any case reasonably should. Where others saw pests or oddities, Newt saw creatures worth understanding, worth protecting, worth loving. He wrote them down, one by one, in a book that generations of young witches and wizards would later carry to school, and in doing so he turned fear into fascination. We can imagine him now, moving quietly among his charges, feeding them and mending them, and asking nothing in return but the pleasure of their company. Consider first the Niffler, surely one of the most endearing thieves ever to slip through a keyhole. It is a small burrowing creature, black and soft as velvet, with a long, slender snout and a coat that seems designed for cuddling. The Niffler loves nothing in this world so much as things that gleam. Gold coins, silver buttons, rings, watches, a stray earring left upon a dresser, all of these it gathers with single-minded delight. What makes the Niffler so wonderfully absurd is its pouch, a small pocket on its belly that holds infinitely more than it ever should, so that a creature no larger than a kitten can tuck away a whole treasury and still look about the room for more. Newt kept several Nifflers, and they were forever escaping to raid jewelry shops and coin purses, tumbling home again with their bellies impossibly full. For all their mischief, they mean no harm. A Niffler simply cannot help itself, and to watch one dig its little paws into a heap of glittering things is to watch pure, uncomplicated joy. Wizards learned long ago to use them for finding buried gold, then to keep them well away from anything they wished to keep. If the Niffler is all motion and mischief, the Bowtruckle is its quiet opposite. Picture a tiny figure, no taller than a hand, made of bark and green twig, with two watchful brown eyes and long, delicate fingers. The Bowtruckle is a guardian of trees, and it makes its home among the branches of those from which the finest wands are carved. It is a shy and peaceable thing, content to sit unseen among the leaves, so perfectly disguised that a passing traveler would take it for an ordinary sprig of wood. Yet the Bowtruckle is fiercely loyal to any keeper it comes to trust. Newt carried one in his breast pocket, a small green companion named Picket, who preferred his warmth to the company of his own kind. When threatened, a Bowtruckle can defend its tree with surprising resolve, though its true nature is tender and easily wounded by neglect. Offer it a woodlouse or two, speak to it softly, and it will cling to your finger with the devotion of a creature that has decided, quietly and completely, that you belong to it. Now lift your eyes to the night sky, for our next friend dances beneath it. The mooncalf is a shy, gentle beast that lives deep underground and rises to the surface only when the moon is full. It stands on 4 spindly legs, with a smooth gray hide and enormous round eyes set upon the top of its head, forever turned upward toward the light that draws it out. On the night of the full moon, in quiet hidden places, mooncalves emerge together and perform a slow and intricate dance, weaving patterns across the earth with their long feet. No one taught them these steps. They simply know them, as though the moon itself hums a tune only they can hear. The old farmers say the silvery dew a mooncalf leaves behind is precious for growing certain magical herbs. But the true gift is simply to witness the dance, a hushed and secret ceremony offered up to the moon by the most bashful of creatures. Not every gentle beast is silent, of course. There is the fooper, a bird of astonishing beauty, its feathers colored in brilliant oranges and pinks and limes and yellows, so bright it seems to have flown straight out of a dream of summer. The fooper sings a song that is at first entirely delightful, a rich and lovely melody. But listen too long, and that same sweet song will slowly unravel the listener's good sense, tipping a calm mind toward a merry madness. For this reason, every fooper sold must come with a charm to silence it, and its owner must renew the enchantment faithfully. We need not fear it here. We may simply admire its colors from a comfortable distance, that improbable rainbow of a bird, and let its song remain a distant, harmless idea as we sink further into rest. And then there is the diricawl, perhaps the most quietly clever of them all. A plump and fluffy bird that the ordinary world believes it has lost forever. Long ago, the non-magical folk knew this bird as the dodo, and they watched it, as they thought, disappear from the earth. What they never understood was that the diricawl had not vanished into extinction at all. It had simply mastered the art of vanishing. When danger draws near, the diricawl blinks itself out of sight in a puff of feathers, only to reappear somewhere safer, somewhere farther, somewhere calmer. The wizarding world has always known it lives on, wandering unbothered through hidden places, a soft and rounded bird that solved the oldest problem of all by learning to be somewhere else. There is something deeply restful in the thought of it, a creature that meets every fear not with a fight, but with a gentle disappearance, choosing peace over panic every single time. These are only a handful of Newt's gentle beasts, the small and shining ones that ask so little of us and give back such quiet wonder. The hoarding Niffler with its bottomless pouch, the loyal Bowtruckle clinging to a trusted finger, the mooncalf turning under the moon, the maddening bright fooper, the vanishing diricawl. Each one, in its own way, reminds us that magic need not be grand or terrible to be true. Sometimes it is nothing more than a warm, breathing creature curled in a case carried across the world by a man who chose to be kind. We can rest easy in their company tonight, knowing the world holds far more softness than it ever lets on. But even the tenderest corners of the magical world have their small troublemakers, the ones that slip into gardens and homes and make a gentle nuisance of themselves. They are not fearsome, only busy, only bothersome, only endlessly determined to be underfoot. Up next in Chapter 18, the garden pests, gnomes, doxies, and Chizpurfles will uncover the mischievous little creatures that burrow through the flower beds, flutter through the curtains, and gnaw quietly at the edges of the wizarding home, and will learn why even a nuisance, seen kindly, can be its own small marvel. We have spent long, restful hours among the gentle beasts that a man like Newt Scamander loved best, the shy and the enormous, the wounded and the wondrous, creatures carried tenderly in cases and coaxed back to health with patience and quiet care. Now we let that wide horizon fold itself smaller, and we bring our attention home, back through the misty fields, back toward the crooked chimneys and the sagging garden walls of an ordinary wizarding house, where the magic is humbler and the beasts far tinier. For not every magical creature roars or soars or hides in some distant mountain fastness. Some of them live under the rose bushes. Some of them nest in the curtains. Some of them burrow into the very wands and enchanted trinkets we keep upon our shelves. These are the small, tiresome, oddly endearing companions of daily magical life, and among them we count the garden pests, gnomes, doxies, and Chizpurfles, the little household nuisances that every witch and wizard learns to sigh over and, eventually, to shoo away. Let us begin in the garden, at a house we might imagine leaning slightly to one side, kept upright as much by love as by carpentry. A home not unlike the burrow where the Weasley family lived. On a warm afternoon in late spring, when the earth has softened and the vegetable beds are green with promise, the garden gnomes make themselves known. They are not the round, painted, red-capped statues that the muggles set among their flowers, smiling forever with fishing rods in hand. The true garden gnome is a living thing, small and squat, with skin like tough old leather and a head shaped, rather comically, like a lumpy potato pulled fresh from the soil. Its little body is hard and knobbly, its arms short, its feet horny, and its whole manner one of stubborn cheek. A gnome will trundle about the flower beds on its stunted legs, digging shallow burrows, gnawing at roots, the carrots and the cabbages. To rid a garden of gnomes is a chore rather than a battle, and there is a rhythm to it that many a wizarding child comes to know well. The method, practiced for generations, is called denoming, and it is done chiefly by hand. One reaches down into the burrow, waits for the indignant little creature to sink its blunt teeth into a finger, which it will do without fail, and then, gripping it firmly by the ankles, one begins to swing. Round and round the gnome goes, whirling in wide circles through the air, growing dizzy and pleasantly disoriented, until at last it is released and sent sailing over the hedge to land with a soft thump in the field beyond. The dizziness is the point of it. A gnome flung while giddy cannot easily remember the way back, and so it wanders off to trouble someone else's turnips instead. There is something almost tender in the whole affair, for no real harm is meant on either side. The gnome bites, the wizard swings, the gnome sails, and both are satisfied that they have done their proper part in an ancient and slightly ridiculous ritual. The gnomes, for all their grumbling, are rather fond of the gardens they infest, and they will return, season after season, drawn back by the loose soil and the promise of a warm burrow. Some wizarding families come to regard them almost as fixtures, tolerating a few stubborn holdouts near the compost heap the way one tolerates a squeaky gate. On frosty mornings, the gnomes huddle deep underground, and in the plump days of harvest they grow bold and fat, and the whole slow cycle of shooing and returning turns as steadily as the year itself. From the garden we drift indoors now, into the hush of a sitting room where heavy curtains hang against the evening chill, and here we meet a pest of a different temper. The Doxie is a tiny creature, sometimes called the biting fairy, and at a careless glance one might mistake it for a fairy indeed, for it has a small, human-like shape and a certain wicked prettiness. Look closer, though, and the resemblance falls away. The Doxie is covered in thick, dark hair. It has an extra pair of arms and legs, and its little mouth is crowded with 2 rows of sharp, venomous teeth. Doxies love the dark cloth softness of drawn curtains above all things, and they will gather there in swarms, breeding in the folds, laying their eggs in the hems, and darting out to nip at any unwary hand that comes to draw the drapes. A Doxie bite is not a thing to be brushed aside, for the venom carried in those tiny teeth can lay a grown wizard low, and so an antidote must be kept close whenever a nest is to be cleared. The clearing itself is done with a potion called Doxicide, a black, sharp-smelling liquid that is sprayed in a fine mist over the infested curtains. When the vapor settles upon them, the Doxies are stunned into a deep, motionless stupor, dropping from their hiding places to lie still upon the floor, from where they may be swept up and carried away. It is careful, slightly smelly work, best done with a cloth tied over the nose and a steady hand upon the spray. And when it is finished, the curtains hang quiet once more, emptied of their small, hidden multitude. Smaller still, and stranger, is the Chizpurfle, a creature so tiny that most who suffer it never see the culprit at all. A Chizpurfle is a minute parasite, no bigger than a flake of pepper, shaped rather like a little crab, with sharp fangs and a hunger for magic itself. Where the gnome craves roots and the doxie craves warmth, the Chizpurfle craves the humming enchantment inside magical things. It burrows into cauldrons and broomsticks, into old spellbooks, and, most vexing of all, into wands, gnawing quietly away at the magical core until the object begins to fail in odd, unaccountable ways. A wand infested with Chizpurfles may spit and stutter, a cauldron may leak its power, a broom may lose its lift, and the owner may spend a long, puzzled, while wondering what has gone wrong before the true minuscule cause is at last discovered nesting deep within. They are drawn, too, to anything rich in magic, and have been known to infest the fur and feathers of more magical beasts, causing no end of itching to creatures far larger than themselves. There are others of this small, domestic company, minor pests that hardly rise to the dignity of a proper monster, yet fill the quiet edges of magical life all the same. The horklump is one such, a fleshy pink growth like a mushroom, sprouting up overnight across a lawn and sending its wiry sinews down into the soil to smother whatever grew there before, prized by gnomes as a favorite meal and by little else. There are the streeling snails that glow, and the flesh-eating slugs that must be picked patiently from the cabbages, and countless other trifling troubles that a witch or wizard learns to manage with a wave, a jar, a spray, or a resigned and gentle sigh. None of them are grand. None of them are feared. They are simply the small tax that magic levies upon a magical home, the tiny tenants that share our walls and our gardens and our shelves, biting and burrowing and grumbling in their tiny way, and asking, in the end, only to be swung over a hedge or misted into slumber and left to their small, persistent lives. And so, we leave the leathery gnomes to their burrows and the doxies to their darkened folds, and the Chizpurfles to their patient, invisible gnawing, and we let our thoughts lift a little higher toward creatures fairer to look upon, yet no less troublesome to keep. Up next in Chapter 19, Cornish Pixies, Fairies, and the Little Winged Folk will uncover how these small, glittering sprites came to flit through wizarding gardens and classrooms alike, why a swarm of electric blue pixies can turn a quiet lesson into cheerful chaos, and what tender secrets the winged folk have carried through the long centuries of magical history. We have spent a little while now among the garden pests, those small and unruly beings that hide beneath cabbage, leaves, and tangle themselves in the roots of ordinary plants. They nibble, they burrow, they scatter when a gardener draws near, and for all their nuisance, they remain gentle creatures at heart, more mischievous than dangerous. And yet, as we drift a little further from the soil and lift our attention toward the air, we find that some of the smallest magical creatures do not stay upon the ground at all. They rise, they shimmer, they flit between the branches and the flowers on wings so thin that the light passes straight through them. So we turn now, softly, to the Cornish Pixies, the Fairies, and the little winged folk. Those bright and weightless beings whose whole lives seem to be spent hovering just above the reach of human hands. Let us begin. Winged folk, it is perhaps the loudest and the most fond of trouble. A Cornish pixie is a tiny thing, no taller than the length of a person's hand, and its skin is a startling shade of electric blue, so vivid that a whole cluster of them looks like a handful of sparks lifted from a summer sky. They come, as their name suggests, from the county of Cornwall in the far southwest of England, where the cliffs meet the sea and the wind carries a taste of salt across the moors. There, among the rocks and the heather, the pixies gather and chatter in shrill little voices that no human has ever quite learned to understand. Pixies cannot truly fly in the way a bird does, for they have no feathers and no proper wings to carry them. Instead, they seem to hang in the air by some quick and restless magic of their own, darting this way and that, seizing whatever they can reach and lifting it high into the branches of trees or the rafters of a roof. They delight in this. They delight in mischief the way other creatures delight in food or in sleep. A pixie left alone in a quiet room will soon fill it with chaos, tipping over inkwells, tangling curtains, and carrying off small objects to hide them where no one will ever think to look. There is a story told in the wizarding world, one that has been passed along with a great deal of amusement, of a whole cage of Cornish pixies once set loose inside a Hogwarts classroom. A teacher by the name of Gilderoy Lockhart, a man far fonder of his own reputation than of any real skill, had brought the creatures before his students with the promise of a grand demonstration. He opened the cage, and in an instant the room dissolved into a storm of electric blue. The pixies swarmed to the ceiling, snatched at hair and robes and spectacles, hauled one poor student up by the ears to hang from a light fixture, and left the whole classroom in delighted ruin. Lockhart, it is said, retreated rather quickly and left the students to gather up the little troublemakers themselves. It is the sort of tale that makes one smile, and it tells us something true. Pixies are not cruel. They are simply overflowing with a restless, giddy energy that must go somewhere, and they would far rather it went into chaos than into calm. From these boisterous blue sprites, we turn to a creature that seems, at first glance, to be their close cousin, and yet is really quite different. We come to the true fairy. When most people who have never met one imagine a fairy, they picture a wise and gentle spirit, a tiny guardian of the woods, full of ancient knowledge. The reality is a little more modest and a little more charming for it. A true fairy is a small, semi-human creature, no larger than a pixie, with a delicate body shaped almost like a miniature person and a pair of insect wings sprouting from its back. Those wings may be like a dragonfly's, thin and glassy, or in the rarer sorts, like the soft, dusted wings of a moth. A fairy possesses only a limited intelligence. It cannot speak, and it does not weave the grand enchantments of legend. What it possesses instead, in truly abundant measure, is vanity. A fairy adores being admired. It loves nothing more than to be looked upon, and it will preen and pose and turn itself in the light so that its wings glitter to their best advantage. Wizards have long taken advantage of this small weakness, and at festive times they gather living fairies to decorate their homes, letting the little creatures perch among the branches of a tree or hover about a doorway, glowing softly and basking happily in all the attention. A fairy asked to sit still and be beautiful is a fairy entirely content, and there is something rather sweet in a creature whose deepest wish is simply to be seen. Now, it is easy to confuse a fairy with another little winged being, and so we should pause to tell them apart. That other being is the Doxie. At a passing glance, a Doxie might be taken for a fairy, for it too is small and winged, but a closer and calmer look reveals the difference. Where a fairy has smooth skin and the graceful wings of an insect, a doxie is covered all over in a coat of thick dark hair, and it has an extra pair of arms and legs so that it seems to bristle with tiny limbs. Its wings are thick and curved, more like those of a beetle than the fine glass of a fairy's. And unlike the vain and harmless fairy, a doxie has a small mouthful of sharp little teeth. For this reason, it is sometimes called the biting fairy, though in truth it is not a fairy at all. Doxies like to nest in the dark folds of curtains and in the shadowed corners of old houses, and a household that finds them must gently coax them out again. But even the doxie, for all its bristle and bite, is a small thing, and it belongs firmly among the little folk we are visiting tonight. From the cool air of curtains and gardens, we drift now toward warmth, toward heat, toward the flicker of flame. For some of the little magical creatures make their homes not in flowers, but in fire itself. Foremost among these is the salamander. This is no ordinary lizard, but a creature born of magical fire, a small pale beast that lives within the flames and feeds upon them. A salamander glows with the heat of its home, and so long as the fire burns, it will thrive, crawling contentedly through the embers. Should the fire die, the salamander will fade with it, for the flame is its life as much as its dwelling. There is a strange and lovely stillness in the thought of a creature so at peace within the very heart of a fire that would harm any other living thing. Where there is magical fire, there is also, sometimes, the ashwinder. An ashwinder is a thin, pale serpent with glowing red eyes, and it is born whenever a magical fire is allowed to burn for too long without being tended. From the neglected embers the slender snake rises, made of ash and heat, and it slips away into the shadows of a house to lay its burning eggs in some quiet, hidden place. Those eggs glow a brilliant red, and if they are gently frozen, they become precious to potion makers. But if they are left alone, they will set the house alight. And so the ashwinder, born of fire, seeks always to spread more of it. Yet the creature itself is short-lived, lasting only an hour or so before it collapses back into a fine gray dust, as though it had never been more than a passing dream of the flames. And there is one last little creature to carry us gently towards sleep, one that belongs neither to the fire nor quite to the flowers, but to the soft dark of a summer night. This is the flitterby moth, a slender, silvery insect that drifts through the evening air on wings that seem to catch and hold the faintest light. To watch a cloud of flitterby moths rise from the grass at dusk is to watch a scattering of pale sparks lift silently into the dark, glowing and fading and glowing again until they vanish among the stars. They ask nothing and trouble no one. They simply glow and drift and are lovely. So we leave the little winged folk here, hovering among the flowers and the flames and the last light of evening, the bright blue pixies and the vain small fairies and the bristling doxies, the fire-dwelling salamanders and the ashen serpents and the glowing moths. They are the small magic of the world, the flicker at the edge of sight. But not every magical creature is so slight, so gentle, so easily held in the palm of a hand. Some are rare beyond imagining, and some are strange, and some carry a power that even the wisest keepers speak of only in a low and careful voice. Up next in Chapter 20, The Rarest Beasts, from the Demiguise to the Deadly Nundu, we'll uncover the creatures that live at the very edges of the magical world, from the shy and gentle Demiguise who can vanish from sight, to the vast and dreaded Nundu, whose very breath is said to be the most dangerous thing a witch or wizard could ever hope to face. We leave behind the little winged folk now, the fairies and the pixies and the doxies. Those tiny flickers of light and mischief that hover at the edge of the garden hedge. As their small wings fade into the dusk, we turn our slow gaze toward something far larger and far stranger, toward the creatures that live at the very outer rim of the wizarding world. The ones so seldom seen that most witches and wizards pass their whole lives without ever meeting a single one. These are the rarest beasts, from the demiguise to the deadly nundu, and many of them once traveled the world tucked safely inside a battered brown leather case that belonged to a gentle magizoologist named Newt Scamander. We follow him now, in our imagination, down the little wooden staircase that folded out of that case and into a hidden world within, where whole landscapes had been coaxed to grow, and where the shyest animals on earth had found a quiet home. We begin with the demiguise, and perhaps that is fitting, because the demiguise is a creature of gentleness and of secrets. It looks a little like a slender ape, covered in long, fine, silvery hair, with great dark eyes that seem to hold a sadness older than memory. The demiguise is a peaceful animal, a herbivore that wants nothing more than to be left alone, and it has two remarkable gifts to make certain that it is. The first is invisibility. When a demiguise senses that it is being watched, or that danger draws near, it simply vanishes, its silver hair bending the light around it until there is nothing left to see but the faint shimmer of empty air. The second gift is stranger still, for the demiguise can see, in a limited and shifting way, into the immediate future. It watches the most probable paths that lie ahead and slips along whichever one keeps it safest, which makes catching a demiguise an exercise in patience and in unpredictability, since one must act in a way that even the demiguise cannot foresee. Its long silvery hair is precious, for when it is harvested with care and woven by skilled hands, it becomes the cloth of invisibility cloaks, those rare garments that hide a wearer completely from sight. So the demiguise, so quiet and so retiring, gives the world one of its most treasured forms of concealment. From the silver-haired dreamer, we move to a creature of feathers and coils, the Akami. Imagine a serpent, but a serpent adorned with plumage and with a pair of great wings, its body shining in blues and greens and soft bronze, its head crowned like some bird of an older age. The Akami is a fierce and protective thing, especially around its eggs, whose shells are made of the purest silver. Yet the most enchanting quality of the Akami is the way its body answers the space around it. The Akami is Coroneptixic, which is a long and lovely word, meaning simply that it can grow or shrink to fit whatever space it happens to occupy. Set an Akami loose in a vast attic, and it will swell to fill the rafters, wings brushing the beams. Coax it toward a small teapot, and it will fold and dwindle, growing smaller and smaller until it curls up snugly inside, no larger than a mouse. There is something soothing in that idea, in a creature so at ease with the shape of its world that it will simply become whatever the room asks of it. Now we lift our eyes higher, up above the deserts of the American Southwest, where the sky itself seems to gather and darken around a beating of enormous wings. This is the thunderbird, a magnificent creature the size of which puts even the largest eagle to shame. Its feathers shimmer with the colors of cloud and sun, and each wing carries the shifting reflections of stormlight. The thunderbird can sense danger long before it arrives, and as it beats those tremendous wings, it stirs the heavens themselves, calling up wind and rain and thunder, so that a flock of them rising can turn a clear day into a rolling storm. The thunderbird gives its name to one of the 4 great houses of a famous American school, and it is said to favor those with the souls of adventurers. We watch it climb into the high air until it is only a dark shape against the clouds, a guardian of storms drifting where no one can follow. Down again to the earth, we meet three creatures of great power and great weight. First, the Erumpent, a large gray beast of the African plains, something like a rhinoceros in build, with thick hide that shrugs off most spells and charms. Upon its nose it carries a single long horn, and within that horn lies a fluid of terrible potency. For anything the horn pierces will swell, and, in time, burst apart. The Erumpent is not an aggressive animal by nature, and it spends its days grazing in peace. But, in the season of courtship, the males can grow reckless, and so wizards give them a wide and respectful berth. Then comes the Grafhorn, hunched and humped and grayish-purple, with two long golden horns and a hide so tough that it repels most magic entirely. Grafhorns roam the mountains of Europe, sure-footed and solitary, and they are among the most stubborn creatures a magizoologist can hope to gentle. Newt Scamander was said to keep the very last breeding pair, tending them with the quiet devotion of a man who could not bear to see a kind of life vanish from the world. And so, at last, we come to the summit of all danger, to the creature that sits alone at the very peak of the classification given to the most fearsome beasts. This is the Nundu, and even to speak of it we keep our voices low and untroubled, for we are only visitors here, watching from a safe and dreaming distance. The Nundu prowls the plains of eastern Africa, and it moves with a silence that seems impossible for its size, for it is a gigantic leopard, vast beyond reckoning, its spotted coat rippling over muscle as it pads through the tall grass without so much as bending a blade. Its great beauty hides a peril unlike any other, because the breath of the Nundu carries disease, a sickness so potent that a single exhalation can wither whole villages. For all its bulk, it is impossibly graceful, and it has never yet been subdued by fewer than about 100 wizards working together in perfect harmony. That is why the Nundu is spoken of, quietly and with awe, as the most dangerous beast alive. Yet even the Nundu, in the hush of our imagining, is simply an animal following its nature under a wide and starry sky, hunting and resting and dreaming its own slow dreams, as deserving of a place in the world as the tiniest fairy we left behind at the garden hedge. And here our long journey through the wondrous creatures of the wizarding world comes gently to its rest. We have wandered from the depths of black lakes to the roots of ancient forests, from the highest storm-wrapped skies to the hidden landscapes folded inside a traveler's case. We have met the fierce and the shy, the enormous and the almost invisible, the beautiful and the strange, and in each of them we have glimpsed something of the wonder that fills a world where magic breathes in every living thing. The dragons sleep now on their distant mountains, the unicorns walk unseen among the silver trees, the demiguise fades softly from view, and the great Nundu settles at last into the warm grasses of the plains. All of them are quiet, all of them are at peace, and as our own eyes grow heavy and the last of these marvelous beasts drift into the dark behind our lids, there remains only one thing left to do, which is to pause, and to wonder gently what all these creatures, gathered together, might have to teach us about the world and about ourselves. And so we come to the end of our long wander through the hidden menagerie of the wizarding world. We began with the great ledger of beasts and the patient scholars who dared to name them. We met the basilisk in the dark and the dragon in the sky, the phoenix rising from its own ashes, and the winged horses climbing the wind. We watched the Thestrals that only the grieving can see, and the wolf that answers the pull of the moon. We drifted down into the black lake with the Merpeople, and walked beneath the forest stars with the Centaurs. We found the spiders in their hollow, the giants in their mountains, the goblins at their deep and clever work, and the House-Elves bound by loyalty and love. We waded past the creatures of dark water, knelt beside the unicorn in its silver light, and learned to face the shapes of our own fear. We watched the Niffler dig for treasure, the Bowtruckle guard its tree, and the little pests tumble through the garden hedges. And at the very last, we glimpsed the rarest beasts of all, elusive and strange, from the gentle demiguise to the deadly Nundu, from the largest to the smallest, from the fearsome to the tender. Every one of them belongs to the same great weave of magic. The world is far wider and far more wonderful than it first appears, and its creatures are still out there tonight, breathing softly in the dark, waiting quietly to be discovered. Good night. What did you think of this journey through every magical creature in the wizarding world? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this changed the way you see these beasts or taught you something new, consider subscribing for more mind-expanding content. And if you know someone who would find this as fascinating as you did, share it with them. These are the kind of conversations that matter,